kind of going both. And to me, that just becomes
So then when you
Unwieldy.
have formal presentation, that's not gonna have anything in it about this.
under this. You're right. If we
Yeah.
separate listening out, you're right. It will not.
And
And
I,
neither would your
And neither
discussion.
with collaboration.
right,
So I mean, and that's
and
that's
so that's
the
why
crux.
I'm just
I think it's
thinking about for a classroom teacher, I'm not sure that
But I
that's.
think-
Well, I think about it from my perspective as a curriculum person, that wouldn't matter, because I would look at all of those and say, how do we put them together in the in what we're going to teach, so
And in our
we'd be pulling from here, pulling
in
from
our
here.
overview to the standards, we would make that explicitly clear too. Just like in writing, like there's no way you're going to divorce research from the writing process or genres from the writing process. They all have to go
Right.
together.
It's just a way of organizing.
It's just a way of
Right.
organizing it. But my fear, as a curriculum coordinator, you get more than about 50 standards, and your standards document is worthless. It does not get taken seriously. It's not something that teachers can manage. Am I misspeaking from a teacher perspective? Like, once you get more than that, and then that's exactly where like the PLC movement's coming in, and data teams are coming in, and they're telling teachers you can't teach all the standards in the document, so pick the ones you want to
Right.
prioritize. And from a curriculum coordinator perspective, that's terrible.
Definitely.
It's just kids are missing things.
Yeah.
So I really feel
That is
strongly
true.
that whatever we end up with has to be under that number, and that's why.
Our standards.
We cannot assume, my job is working with school districts.
And that's what we've been hearing,
Right.
every trainer that we've had lately, he's really into power standards.
Oh, and you can't assume that teachers will put these things together. I mean, because I go into a lot of districts and go through their curriculum and look at their units and look at all their curriculum, and you cannot make the assumption that they're going to naturally pull
Or
those things.
can,
Well,
my new
that's-
teachers, I'm
yes,
thinking of my new
yes.
teachers, that's,
But when we say
Oh,
that about
wow.
speaking and listening, that's really problematic for writing, because we
Yes.
do
Right.
separate everything out in writing, so that means that,
that's
so like, how do we solve that problem across the board? I don't know that we
And I'll
I
be
don't know that we
honest,
can.
looking through how other states have done it,
Right.
I mean, there are some standards out there under speaking, listening, and the word listening isn't even mentioned.
oh,
Wow.
If
it's a
you
good
look,
way to define irony.
you know what I'm saying? If you are looking through it and it's for speaking and listening, it's maybe mentioned in one little place.
Yeah, because we're really more concerned about the speaking part than the listening part. Typically,
Yeah,
you know, when
so
you think
let-
about it, because usually presentations.
So if we sort it out, we put listening, look, if we try it, and we just put listening, and we put whatever goes under listening, right? And maybe we could try it and see if it'll work that way. If it doesn't work that way, then sort it out under giving a discussion, no, participating in a discussion, giving a presentation, listening to a presentation. Why don't we try it and see if it'll work?
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say some of the two most basic things we put up there, verbal communication, nonverbal communication. We gonna do something like that?
Right.
I mean,
fair.
seriously.
That's fair.
Yeah, that goes in both also.
Yeah.
Which part of it goes back to what I said briefly yesterday. Are we forcing clusters at all? Like,
Yeah.
do we need to have cluster headings, or can we just list, these are speaking and listening standards?
Right,
And
and I think that would be more, it would be a simple
these are
solution.
reading standards, these are writing standards.
If we do that, we're going backwards
Maybe, I mean, and I don't
We're
feel
going
strongly on that
backwards
opinion
to
either.
the
I'm just
first
wondering.
days of the GLEs.
Well, I
Just
think that
listening.
the reading ones, when we worked on those
Okay.
worked out well because we kind of saw those as a higher, as a progression, like a, yeah. Because hierarchy, like we have to do these before we can do these, before we can do these, so that lends itself well to having those
We
specific
also
clusters.
know
Promoting an
language
isolated
people,
checklist.
But here, it's
it's
a little different.
inherent in
Yeah, you're right.
language
That's
that
fair.
Promoting
it
an isolated
groups
checklist.
things.
Yeah.
That's what language
That's a
is
good point.
about, you know, like, there are different kinds of cows, and they're different. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
that's what we do. And people who read this are gonna be really confused if they don't have a text on it.
Well, and I do agree with what Gina's saying when you think about it, it goes right back to the GLEs just being that list. And it's, and what
Okay, I'm gonna
we ended up wanting to do was just go through and go, we do this one first, this one second, this one third.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate here for a minute, so I just got on the ISTE standards. And with all the flipped classrooms, they have replaced the word listening with thinking. So that's just a thought, cause then it would promote, support, model creative and innovative thinking. Engage students in real world thinking.
What is this?
The ISTE standards for all the flipped classrooms, because listening now is their learning space. They're watching their teachers teach at home. I'm thinking of like the school district in St. Louis, Alton, is it Alton, that's gone, it's completely flipped now, I don't know, and this, the ISTE standards are, that's their push, is to replace listening with thinking.
Except that so many people are still in the same situation with, as this Danette in the middle school classroom, and the students are easily distracted, so active listening seems to be an important skill.
Oh, I agree, oh, I agree.
The nice
And,
thing
and
about
I
this
don't think we should replace it, but I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that thinking kind of is what you're talking about. Active listening is active thinking, it's reflective, it's.
Well, the nice thing about using the word thinking is it changes what it really looks like, because active listening, I can really fake that.
Mhm.
I'm just saying.
Right.
Are you demonstrating now?
Well, no, not but really, I could, I could fake that, right? I could make it look like I'm taking notes. I mean, I've done that before during admin meetings. I'm sitting there, oh, that's on tape. I
And
know,
you're
but
making
like,
that
I'm,
grocery
it looks
list.
like I'm taking notes, but really it's something else. I'm like writing my to-do list. right?
Yeah.
The faculty meetings.
I mean, like, that's what happens, yeah, so, yeah. So there's that element of, but what are you really doing during that time? And it's really about the thinking that I'm doing, yeah, that's really a nice point.
Does that evolve at a higher age? Like,
Older students do a lot of multitasking,
Yeah.
a lot of
But the flipped
multitasking.
classrooms are starting younger. They're flipping in second grade, so.
So I guess, okay, let's go back to the question of, do we have clusters for this or not? And then if we do, what are they? And then maybe we just do what we do with writing and bite the bullet, write them down, and then go forward and figure it out from there.
I have one question on clusters, do they have to be, like, can we write a descriptive sentence about the cluster?
Yes,
And
yeah.
then we need to
Yeah.
give it to what we're
Sure.
trying to say, and then how we break it out, so.
Sure.
Which was one of the things I think we did like about South Carolina,
Right.
was when they had their, they at least
Here's
got
how
that
this goes
listed.
together, this
Yeah.
is what this would look like.
Well, and so do the core standards do that. They have a statement of what that
They do.
is,
So
and
do
then they
you-
have
and
the
then the
ABCD, it's the same thing.
Okay, so do you wanna do that now, or do you wanna just like put up 3 different categories, or 2 different categories, and come back to those sentences later, get to the language?
My bias would be to leave a listening category, but to have a descriptive statement that says listening is an active part of what you do in both presentation settings and collaborative settings. But I'm happy to go with the way.
So you want a writing and then speaking and then listening?
No.
I would argue the 3
Like a cluster
clusters
of
under
listening.
speaking and listening would be
Speaking,
listening,
or presenting, or.
collaborating, and presenting. Knowing that there's still gonna be some overlap, I mean, anytime we're creating clusters, there's gonna be these weird things that could go either way.
I think it would be easier to start with 3 and then reduce that to 2 later if
Listening,
we wanted to,
collaborating,
than
presenting.
to go the other way.
And
Okay.
maybe if we see it
And I do like the
in
idea of
3,
enhancing.
we can figure out, well, it would be
Yeah,
really
'cause
easy
that
to
would include-
weave
Slice and cut.
listening in here, or
Okay, so we're gonna stick with listening, so I'm putting down, or forever hold your peace.
Yeah.
And then we can, I like the idea of actually taking that to a more descriptive piece with a sentence and saying, this is what we
With all
think
of
about.
these, yeah.
Yeah, so then, what's next? Is it discussion, is it collaborating? Which is collaborating?
Collaborating.
Okay, so
collaboration.
what goes under that?
Yeah, collaboration and discussion.
Collaboration and discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, or collaborating and discussing, so they agree.
I don't know that let's not make it through it.
Listen.
I love it.
Listenation, I like that. I believe the grammar police.
Listenation. Okay, what goes there?
Appreciate differing viewpoints and discussion, yeah.
Respectiveness and viewpoint.
This isn't listening, this is speaking? Okay,
Well, that's a fair point, I mean, yeah,
It's both.
It's both.
and collaborating is gonna be that weird one that
You
is
know
both,
what?
right? I mean,
It's
it's got its
thinking.
feet in
It's
both
thinking.
worlds.
let's add one.
I have it, I can
I guess
listen.
you're right.
We
If-
can do listening, thinking.
If that skill is divorced from speaking, then yes, it would be listening, but I feel like the spirit of that standard is that you're appreciating it so that when you respond, you're being collegial in your response. Does that make
Okay.
some sense?
This one too?
Yeah.
Where it goes.
So we respect it by not tearing it down. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Right.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Establish
Like, totally,
procedures for
like, for
collegial
sure.
conversations.
What? Sorry.
The bottom one would be,
Sorry, I wasn't respecting you.
Engage in a variety of collaborative discussions.
Yes. Contribute to discussion.
Awareness of audience.
the right audience is another.
A lot of
search area.
those can be, combined,
Right.
sorry, they're very.
Well, this one's
Yeah,
probably more.
Contribute to
Yeah,
this,
well, that's
yes.
not, that's definitely
Isn't
collaborative.
awareness of audience more when you're speaking?
I would argue it better
Being-
fits that one, but yeah,
being
you're right.
aware.
But it is.
So is this presentation or is it?
I would say it's more
That's
present,
presentation.
yeah. I mean, that's
Okay.
what
What about these guys?
I would argue they're more presentation than collaboration, but again, they're both, I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, like,
they're both.
this one's really
they're both.
important. This is too, like, so you're making eye contact and stuff like that, but when I think about sitting in a room or sitting in a circle talking to people and and slashing back in your chair and
So,
whatever, like,
maybe-
there's a lot of
Well,
nonverbal that goes
So
on
maybe
here.
it's not presentation.
I'm looking at my watch
Maybe
during
maybe the cluster
survey.
heading is just speaking. I mean, now granted, collaborating is speaking too, but you know what I mean? Maybe speaking
Of course,
is the
that's
heading.
listening, I guess, really, when I start thinking about it like that, right?
Well,
That's
but if
more
you're
listening.
if you're
When I think
speaking,
about no, but when I think about what I was talking about was more like the listening aspect of the nonverbals.
Or just uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, but I'm thinking about like the listening aspect of the nonverbals, and I try really hard. I always cross my arms, and I try really
Well,
hard
I
to make
was
sure that it
telling
doesn't look like I'm like.
I said I just read an article where they did a study, and they said that they have found that more often than not, when you see people doing this, they're engaged in thinking and deep thought. But it's not that they're mad or they're angry or they're digging their heels in.
Right.
Right.
It's that I do it too. When I need to think, I'll,
Close-
And I
Yeah,
just
you
have
close in.
yes. And
Yeah.
so it was so funny you said that because I just read that a couple days ago. I thought,
Well, I'm glad you said that. It makes me feel a little bit better about my
Yeah,
posture.
Peter Elbow had a whole article
Yeah.
on what pre-writing looks like, and
Uh-huh.
often it looks like a closed
it
off.
does.
They're
and
looking out the
and I
window
know
and they cross their arms.
I reflected and thought about it and went, I do this when I go to think all the time.
So these are more presentation. That's what
We-
we're thinking,
or
right?
we could call them just speaking, like speaking and presenting. If you want to generalize, if you want to broaden it more.
I know.
I don't. Okay, that's fine. Great.
At the moment.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with
Perfect.
presentation, whatever we're gonna call it. I'm just gonna, this one is. And this one is.
Strategic use of media down there.
And this one, and
Yeah.
this one.
Because I would argue, even in a collaborative setting, you're shifting into a presentational mode when I take the floor and I'm talking to you, right? And now these presentational
Sure.
skills,
Formal.
Okay, so should I just call that presentation? Presenting?
yeah.
Keep with the, yes, please.
I'd call it presentations, because you're listening and you're giving.
Okay.
If you're keeping it present,
I'm just keeping it here. I'll change it.
We'll clean them up.
well,
Change
but,
later.
wait a minute, but on presentations.
You're right, that is different.
You're listening to okay, so if you listen to a presentation, that's gonna go under listening, right?
Right,
Okay,
for now.
got it.
So now it's you decide to fix it. Okay, that was so awesome. Did you get my nonverbals there?
We need honest music.
One more addition, perhaps. I can't do it too.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
So under appreciating different viewpoints and discussion or above, maybe one that goes with it is consensus building.
Yeah, we have to.
That'd be under the collaborating.
Yeah, with collaborative.
Yeah, with collaborative.
That was worth the interruption.
It was.
Totally.
Well done.
Is,
Which is funny.
is consensus building, Elena's terminology for that? Is there a new
Well, it
terminology
will
out
be
there
after
now?
we write it.
I don't, I'm not
It
hip
will
with
be after we write it.
That's right. We're
finding
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
And that would be collaborative.
Here, I'm thinking of professional learning communities, what do they call it? Do they still call it things, it's just building?
I don't know.
Yes.
We're not used
Okay, anything else before I celebrate?
What about singing?
Okay,
Miming? That's not verbal. Okay, so we knocked out speaking and listening. I think language is going to be tough. I think it may be. So why don't we take a short break to transition paper and to use the restroom and to take care of whatever you need to take care of. And it's almost a quarter till by this clock, so do you want to say 10 by this clock? Is that good enough time?
Oh, yeah.
Usually.
I mean, I know it's probably more than enough, but that might give me. It's 10 o'clock.
Yeah, it's not very good. It is
That was
pretty.
like,
It is pretty.
I probably was.
One of these days, we'll have to go to Madison.
It was bad, used to
Really
be,
bad.
it was neat.
I know, Madison's has to have, maybe our final meeting,
Yeah.
we can go to
Yeah.
Madison.
They
Yeah,
sent you the
actually,
link for
there's-
this, just so you know.
Oh,
They
thank
sent
you.
the link for that one.
Is this the 21st?
It is.
Oh, you better hurry.
I know, and see what I mean? Can you tell from looking at my email what mine was? That's so funny.
Mine too. Except a lot of mine are restaurant.
Yeah, well.
Restaurant coupons, Maurice's coupons.
We need to really watch things too,
I know, and I,
because if we have to create a set of college and career ready, we've got the college, but we don't have the career ready.
I'm trying to think of where, I don't have that. I just don't want to get
Yeah.
AC what?
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Oh, I know. I know.
Career readiness right down there, look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, ACTE is, Association
I
for
know.
Career Technical Education.
That's the problem.
we might wanna kind of keep an eye on those standards. Because like I said, these have to pass the college and career readiness test. And we wanna document that those, we're looking at those two documents.
For the presentation.
Yeah, I do think, yeah.
Whatever that's
Yeah,
called.
yeah, I do think we need to document that.
I think they need to know that the orange
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're using that,
Right.
we need to be using that, we need to be using that. Well, there's. We will have to
Yes.
Can we just show them what we're doing?
I think so.
No, I did.
We wanna add
That's
that, make sure.
Yeah, that we're consulting these documents, make sure that we're creating a set of college and career ready
Right.
standards.
Right, so we can say,
Well,
the very first.
Well, I think the board needs to know we are taking that into consideration.
Yes.
We are aware of that, we know,
Right,
we know the implications if we don't follow it,
right,
therefore.
we have right in front of our face.
Right.
When you clean my area.
I dumped in my car last night, which is fine. It was here all along.
Well, we're in a Walmart, and fixed my glasses for me.
Good.
Very grace. And then I went to the Grand Cafe.
Is it good?
Yes, it was.
I heard it was good.
It was
What is
really, it was beautiful food. But it's the kind that you eat and 2 hours later, you're like starving again. It was really beautiful. It
On
was
that
so
high
pretty.
street,
Yeah. It had carrots and green beans layer on the bottom and salmon.
Oh, I wanna go there next
Potato
time.
coating
Oh.
and a sauce. But as soon as I ate it, I was almost hungry again. So,
Maybe.
but it was really delicious.
We should.
Oh, yeah.
And I liked.
Oh, yeah.
What'd you say?
So 2 hours later, I was
Madison?
the last
I
eating
always
so
drink
much.
I eat at Madison's, cause it's the only time I eat pasta is when I'm
It
here.
used to be a lot better than it has been.
Other than that, I never eat it.
So I don't know anymore.
I know people used to.
I was just like, oh, look at that. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I grew up here.
Oh, did you?
Steadily, it's going down. Like my last few times, it's not, but
Is there a good Chinese restaurant in there?
I see how it is.
You doubt it. Madison's is always
I
great,
thought it was funny.
and I have one by my house, but it's a knockoff and it's not as good.
They
They
have,
don't keep the same standards
Yeah.
as they do here,
yeah,
so whenever I come here, that's where I eat.
right. Harris's pizza's really good.
I've had that before.
There was, I don't even know if it's open, there was a sushi restaurant over on Boulevard, Keystone Sushi.
Oh.
What else? There really aren't a
It's
lot of options.
really
Fine dining.
Yeah,
But-
fine dining is.
Yeah, exactly.
Carrie, I won't be here on the second.
Okay.
I just, my husband, he got a promotion at work, which requires him to be someplace on the second. Well,
for
Sedalia
him.
to be exactly, so
Okay.
he's just gonna need to be.
See, yeah, so you're gonna have one.
I know, and I told him, he goes, I said, this is not on the calendar. September, he goes, I know, but I can't.
It's one of those things you can't like, I
No.
can't not be there.
No.
Yeah, that's understandable.
So he has to be down there at like 7 AM on that morning, and it's a 4-hour drive from us, so I have to be here.
You're fine.
But I'll be here Monday.
Promotions are exciting. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you get the mixed bag.
It means more travel.
Or what did you say?
But those ones aren't.
Lindsay, did you
Well, it's good to have them gone for a while. And I appreciate the meetings.
Yeah, I'll take Heather's. I don't know where. Yeah, I don't know if, if Stacy, I think Stacy takes hers and brings it back.
Oh,
I don't know, Heather's
But
is
I'll
sitting
take
right there.
Heather's, yeah. And just for
Oh,
the
there are two
notes,
there.
did you, Karen Mason, did you know she wasn't coming?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanna make sure. Did we know about Heather?
I didn't know she was gonna be here yesterday, so
Okay.
I assumed she wasn't gonna be here either day.
I just wanna make sure that I get it in the notes.
You got it, showed up yesterday.
So Lindsay. Okay.
Welcome back.
I'm gonna go ahead and take a picture.
You could sound a little more excited to be here.
I know why. I'm very excited because language is my favorite.
Yeah.
Good.
I
So
saved it for
I'm
you.
glad I did not miss that.
Nikki was on very supportive of that.
I thought of Halloween when I picked it out, so. And then all of the
We all should be wearing royals today.
It's true.
Hit traffic, I know.
well, Nick, I wanted to ask you a question. Anybody else that has a?
Oh, and
Yeah.
Carrie, I have to leave.
So,
not that
like I said,
it's
the
too
past
much, but
few
I'm gonna have
years,
to leave
our
a little
PBC
early because I've been
has
meeting in
been
South
power
Kansas
standards
City that
Here-
starts at 5.
mile wide.
Here's-
PBC.
Here's my take on it, this is my take on it.
Where does that come from?
Right. Well, no, it comes from, like, Doug Reeves and the whole PLC movement, what I really think it comes from is common sense, so like, when you look at state standards from about a decade ago,
Well, I
right?
told them I maybe wouldn't get
it's-
to meet until
really,
5:30, but
The only
I
reason a
have
lot
to
of them
drive right
disappeared is
down.
Common Core.
by
For
the-
better or worse,
by
you
the
like Common Core, not like
Because
Common
they
Core, right?
hope
But
if you
Common
take-
Core
do you go
replaced
fishing
those state
350?
standards.
I
across most
usually
states
go to
across the
Columbia
country.
and then go 70,
What
and I
has
didn't
always
think
been
about
best-
that.
But
best
we had
practice,
driven like
right,
when we came
is
to the
being
lake
laundry
before.
list
when
of
we
standards,
went to
right?
Lincoln,
100, like,
we
if
had
you looked at our old
taken
GLEs, right, we had like
Uh-huh.
And I
120
wonder
GLEs.
sometimes, like I
And
didn't
what
ride out
happened in
today, if I
reality,
missed some of the
teachers
traffic.
did not
Right.
teach
If I
them,
went fast.
right?
That's
There
where
were
I'm
way
going to
too many,
GMKC.
there's just way
so-
too many.
I mean,
You
I
can't
think they
possibly
teach you a little.
actually
bit,
teach, and
but
especially
that's
kids,
right.
all of
The
those
traffic.
things.
ACT.
And
When I get off
so,
of I-70 on the 435,
that
that's
was just not
always where I
effective,
get
and
congestion
so
anyway.
Standard
Even though I'm going the opposite
changing the
direction as
standards
most
though, and so
people.
what our
I know,
PLC
but I
movement
tend to
started
go
to say
to
is, we're gonna
50
say,
minutes.
you have to deal with the standard you have, right, but
My
if the
son
states
drives
are gonna
from
do it,
Alabama.
say
Yeah,
at
like
the
so many
local
good
level,
reasons.
or even at the building level, or even at the classroom level,
It's really
then
very
there's
exactly when they-
It comes right into Sabine,
because,
50 comes into
it's
Sabine,
taking
and
us
it comes
to
across.
right? You know, what I
Where's
think
Greytown?
should be
And we'll run
happening
right
is
into it,
not
and it comes
that,
in
right,
there by the.
for
My
just
Greytown-
isolation. I think that states should be adjusting for the standards. They should be setting the higher standards for
That's right, for us,
right? As a state, we should make sure that we're not pushing out an unmanageable number of standards.
Yes, what they say is if you pick the power standards
He's always like,
that are
Mom, why would you
important, the
take
other
this
things
even
will fall into.
And I don't buy that at
I
all.
don't
And that's
When
what
I used to
terrifies me as a curriculum coordinator, that if you have every teacher, every DLT, especially teachers like that, doing that, then you have no curriculum session. I have no idea how the kids did you cover this or did you cover this? Have you mastered this? Have you
It's a
not?
good idea.
And especially
I
if you
don't know
build
where to go
vertical
with that.
connections like we're
You
talking
know,
about.
everybody has
You
one.
can't count on the kids to know
I
what
have
they're
to
supposed to do to your everything in the system. So,
Wow.
right, so that's why I feel like I totally agree that you need a limited number of standards.
My old
But I
librarian
feel
was asking
the
me, she's like,
district or better yet, the state should be the one making
no, I just can't.
But you know the average first age, the average age of first time public authors is so the average author like Laura Roberts. She's in her eighties publishing books, so I'm not fretting that I'm turning 50 and I'm not gonna write as much.
No, I think the state should be all essential. Only give you
More life, you
And here they are.
Did
And
that.
so I
That's what
just
we've
can't
been
get to
doing
that.
with social studies too. And that's what
You write for your kids when your kids write, or you do all the reading
what
and
used to
then
be
they
a
write.
laundry list of all of these
Yeah,
facts and things
it's
you're
pretty
supposed to
scripted what to do.
broken it down to like 8 essential questions.
But that's what they
That
do.
show you, so obviously have to know the people and the places
It's
to answer
remediation.
those questions.
This is
But
what they need.
what's important now is the big picture, and there's only 8 of them, and that's your year. And that to me is.
I may not be driving anymore.
Because then our assessments are based on those 8 questions, that's a manageable thing as a teacher.
Okay, so this will
But
go.
again, I feel that needs to be done at the district or the state level, and not at the classroom level, because of, like you said, otherwise.
It just never made sense to me the way they were doing it. Well, they would say, pick your power standards, pick 6, 7.
Having individual PLTs prioritize some standards over others.
Are the rest
kind of
fall?
No, to present in Chicago, I hate to.
I think from our standpoint, it kind of naturally.
I like
occurs that way
Chicago,
after we
but this
look
is the
over
South
the
End,
map results and
Plainfield.
see
Yeah,
I
no, and I
don't
agree,
like
like,
Where
that
they
absolutely should
and
be happening.
therefore,
Right.
this is what we're gonna hit that.
Yeah,
hour,
and that makes sense.
Which
That
is
makes
what
sense.
we did,
Right.
putting it on more.
But it gets lost in translation, that's sort of what I
Oh,
think.
it just said here,
I
The
think that's
PDC
what
people from Rolla actually came in and said,
Or you can hire a driver.
every, they got 8 standards per grade. So you math,
And that's what you teach.
communication, and the others will fall
That's
into
what's
place.
scary.
Those are the big boulders, and the little pebbles will come.
your big rocks,
Yeah.
big rocks.
But now they're so busy working on teacher evaluation. With
That's thrown.
this NEE thing that just is driving everybody nuts.
Well, the problem we're having in our building is because so many of them are required, our sped teachers don't have, they can't tell our administrators, I don't know, the sped meetings anymore as LEAs.
Right.
Because
So
they're too
now
busy.
they're too busy doing the evaluations,
Multiple
and so
evaluations.
basically the sped teachers will only on your real severe heavy hitters. You call them in, and that the other sped teachers are trained now to serve as LEAs.
I know, our
Well, it's viewed as busy work, frantic, a lot, the unit of instruction. It really is.
I'm just
I don't know,
starting advising for the
Demonstration
first time.
and you can lift one off the internet.
I think, we're only doing crazy indicators.
That's
But I
all right.
said,
Yeah.
to that effect.
That's the thing I'm most nervous about,
I
really
just
starting
felt
out on my.
I always like
Okay,
when
and
we
I
for
think
feedback rather than an immediate response.
Yes, there was that and
I taught a freshman seminar.
You know, I just wanna shake on.
Well,
Okay, but I don't have to.
I'm like, should all of you got me folks?
Even though you received the stuff, you gotta use it. We call it the unit.
Yeah.
We have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I actually.
You're four, here's your problem, here's your answers.
I did 2 so different from my MU students, so different from my MU students. You know, my MU kids, I always said school was ranked up number 7. And
That's what
tailgating,
it's right.
partying, and everything else. That was number two, socializing.
Well, somebody in my district, they said, well, why is your doing TV? And I said, hello,
Your resident expert.
why is it,
Forward,
you know, explain to me all the discussions we're having about what good teaching is in ELA. Why is this TV?
No,
I'm teaching a digital, the person and I call their master
So is your PhD, the dissertation that you?
My dissertation was on digital literacy, it was on preparing future teachers to teach in a digital world.
Uh-huh.
And how underprepared we are in the college level to prepare digital educators.
And that's MU, College of Ed.
That's where I did, I finished in 2012, yeah.
Here's your toilet paper.
Yeah.
And Spencer is letting me develop, I've already developed a digital literacy class,
And I always have to win it.
and I'm going to provide through a digital literacy minor for our education. I just think our folks are going into schools, no idea they don't even know what one-to-one means. So they're going into these schools going, like, you're gonna be teaching in a one-on-one classroom and you have no idea what it is, we've not prepared you.
You know, the
And you
thing
just
I've
don't
heard
know.
the most from districts around in Kansas City that have that, where they're going to do workshops and stuff. Case Klein, we're doing one in Schlegel on the Kansas side, is the case.
See, another
Right,
one,
you know,
I am,
Schlegel teachers
it's
are
like,
just,
I am missing.
they are so
so
upset
much
that their students have the computer out, and they just know that it could happen when they're
Oh,
on
you've gotta go.
the text.
I get so
They told
frustrated
me
when I hear that though,
because
because
I'm
I've been in a one-to-one. I was in a one-to-one for the first time 9 years ago.
And now I'm like
right?
33,
And
it's 27.
it doesn't function the way you think it would function.
And it doesn't have to, I mean, I,
They could fix
And
that, in
you,
other
and you
words,
need
they
to
don't.
change,
yeah.
well, for one thing, you have to adjust your thinking.
right,
I, you know,
You change the
I
culture.
remember the first, I was part of the very first cohort and 20 teachers all got their own device and we began to
Having
read
issues, you know what I mean?
about
And they're
integrated
not there,
technology.
exactly.
And we sat in our very first in-service that fall, and I had my laptop out, I don't remember who the guy was who was speaking, but he mentions a book. Guess what I did? I'm immediately looking for that book.
right,
I was attentive, I was such that I wanted to continue to build my knowledge at that time. That's one of the things that kids do, and how can that be a bad thing?
right.
No, I agree.
Well, we were at Fulton High School and they're getting Chromebooks, but
They are?
see, I helped Kim Presco, she's the principal of Battle High School, and she was going one-to-one, she's like, Barry, I wanna use your research and I wanna see what you need to do, I'm like, you need your teachers to get their devices and you're ahead of the kids
Yes.
getting their devices.
And that's what we have just.
Because really, it should start young and
But
go
do
up
you
and not
believe-
start in high
agreed.
school.
But do you believe, Barry, that the teachers need to have the same devices as kids?
Sort of say I do, but they do, but I don't not necessarily, they need to have access to the same apps. Like when we're
The same
training them
kinds
to
of
use
tools,
Notability, the
yes,
same
yes.
tools. So we're training them in Notability and what type, because that's what I'm using now here to know
Well, and
that
I'm
there's
using
a.
Evernote.
Right, and I
So,
love
I mean, and
Evernote,
it doesn't matter, it's, there are lots of tools that do similar things.
because I'm not crazy about Chromebooks. Fulton's using Chromebooks.
I'm not crazy about them at the high school, at least at high school. I mean, we have a good number of them in our upper 3 to 5 buildings, and they serve their purpose really, really
Right,
well.
right,
You need tablets at the primary,
He
like
really
the
does
K2.
have an
right,
Middle, it depends on what you wanna do. High school, they need a lot
they
with
do.
lots of capabilities.
And they were looking at things to turn that into a laptop
And the
keyboard
Chromebooks,
and the
they are-
Chromebooks,
I don't
they're
have a
limited.
manager.
But I'm doing a grant right now because Kevin Cheval is taking the education department in a new one-to-one, so she steered me toward a grant that I think we're
I
gonna
have
get a
$33,000
$3,000 grant.
Well, you know, these people at KCK, this is their first year to have the one-to-one, and I see what you're doing, the learning curve and how they make your adjustments.
Mhm.
I
Yeah, they
definitely
need to be
make the point
trained.
about looking on, but you know, we know to look up stuff we wanna look up.
But there's
Subject
reluctance,
conversation.
you,
Yeah.
but you, right, and there are a lot of the teachers are,
I had,
they're not eager adopters, you know, they're pretty reluctant or they're very narrow in what they do. And you don't have to know all the tools
No,
that
no,
you
no.
know, but you have to be
You never
willing
will.
to.
I mean, in fact, I follow so many blogs,
We ready to
just so
come
that I
back?
can stay on top of.
Ready to talk about language?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
only in the female, it's only in that.
So this is one that I can see being interesting because in everything else we've done thus far, we've talked in pretty broad terms. And this one could end up being very specific.
And I think it should.
But I don't think it should be in the terms we're talking about next.
I would agree with that.
Because we've been talking about big picture,
Could I,
big picture reading, big picture writing, big picture speaking and listening,
Right.
and then we take it to that more, you know,
I think the specificity will come in the grade.
Right.
yes,
Right.
yes.
right. So but my thinking is that because of the way we think about grammar and language, that we will end up thinking about it in specifics as opposed to a broader.
Yes, I'm probably already in the vertical alignment mode, you know,
Right.
because that's where I live.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's not, I don't live so much in these
Right.
areas.
Right. So
But
we
why
need to
don't
be
we
thinking
sort of-
about it as broad as we can and then take it down to like, so when we think about, maybe we need to be thinking about really being sure that we're thinking about graduate outcomes. So like when they leave, what are those things with language we want them to do, what are those things with grammar we want them to be able to do, with conventions we want them to be able to do. So that will steer us to that, being able to do that progression of conventions all the way through and vocabulary or whatever. So I don't know, I can see us getting to listing lots of discrete skills that's not been our, and we're not there yet, so we need to be thinking kind of bigger picture about around language and conventions and grammar that we want the students to have when they leave us. So,
So you're saying for me not to panic yet?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
We'll get there.
And always
And I
remember that whatever the standards say, you can teach what the hell you want.
Yeah, well, I generally do. And always have.
and the other thing I think we need to consider and remember is, all the things we just talked about is speaking and listening. And, that we can disagree with each other or say, oh, but that's probably not where we're going yet, and be okay with that. So, anyway, alright, so, let's start, talk about language.
Well, if I do get too specific, just say, hey.
So I have a question because I wasn't here when we came up with that. So are we talking about demonstrating a command of conventions? Is that what, okay.
And vocabulary, didn't we decide?
Would be a lot of other stuff.
So do we have two broad categories of conventions and vocabulary?
I don't know, I just know that we talked about those things
Well, I
being
think
in there.
grammar and usage,
Grammar and usage.
and vocabulary.
And do we want grammar and usage together?
I don't care.
Yes.
I like it together, yeah, we
Yes.
do too. We both three together,
I like it together.
hand in hand.
Are we throwing stuff out?
I would be fine with that,
So,
you guys wanna start?
capitalization, is that too
No,
specific?
no, that's too specific.
Okay.
Well, How
That's
about
why I said
demonstrate command
of conventions.
Right,
in spoken and written English?
Right,
Well-
right.
and here's why I broke out like capitalization and punctuation, because that's like specifically only in writing, whereas like there are other command, like usage features that you would use in writing or speaking. I don't know if that matters.
No, it's in
Okay.
speaking.
Okay,
Those would be subheadings.
okay.
It's in speaking anyway.
So,
Okay, are we gonna, you said the idea of starting broad rather than creating a listing maybe on these?
Right, yeah.
So do we wanna start with,
Conventions
grammar
of
and
standard.
usage as one category and vocabulary as another category?
Yeah.
And automatically start separating?
But we may not have many, if we're staying this general, which I'm fine with,
Of
we may
grammar
not
and
have many
usage
things
of
to
standard
categorize.
Well, I'm worried if we go capitalization, punctuation,
No, that's too,
I'm
that's
fine.
too
Yeah,
detailed.
that's fine.
Yes.
That's too
So that's
detailed
what conventions.
at this
so we
level.
get
I
to,
think it's grade level,
That's grade level, yes.
but I do want it there.
no, I do too, I'm with you.
Grammar and usage of standard English.
I'm sorry, what?
Conventions of grammar and
Standard English,
usage.
grammar and usage.
Okay, standard English,
That's
grammar
gonna
and
go
usage.
under grammar and usage.
Standard English, yeah. Grammar and usage.
Would variety
In
of
speaking
sentences,
and writing.
In speaking and writing.
Variety of sentences could go under writing if you wanna do more speaking.
Standard English, grammar and usage. I don't really like those.
This is really long and crazy.
That really is going to be attention to English standards in the category.
Okay.
Okay, so the category
Which is
is
fine,
grammar and usage.
Yeah, the categories, grammar and usage, we don't need to.
Right, but what we're, yeah,
Okay, someone said that.
Variety sentences, is that too, or a variety of, what I'm trying to say.
Sentence, yeah, you're talking about sentence structures or
Yeah,
types.
variety of
That's-
sentence structure.
I think that's pretty little too, though.
see,
Yeah.
that's where I'm torn
Okay,
right now.
well, I
Like,
just-
will you
because
have, so,
Okay.
just
That's
give me a
our
second.
sit.
Yeah,
Then we
So,
have
like-
to start
like
spitting
if
out.
sentence structure is a standard,
Right,
right, then what does sentence structure look like 6th through 12th grade?
Right.
If
So-
capitalization, and maybe capitalization is too specific, but that's what
Right.
I'm wondering, like
On
how,
our desired graduation outcomes for language skills.
Thank you.
We had demonstrate mastery of essential conventions of standard English in speaking and writing, and that was sentence structure, subject verb agreement, verb tense and consistency, punctuation rules.
I like this one.
And then we had distinguished between using formal and informal language within various settings. Use an understanding of the English language to help make sense of unknown words encountered while reading, and develop a broad academic vocabulary. Those were kind of our 4 key points.
We should
And
write
this
those
is-
up there.
When you say
Okay.
we, who's
We,
We did
Maybe
that.
like
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
our graduation outcomes.
the graduation outcomes.
What was the first thing you said?
Develop a broad academic vocabulary.
Okay.
Then we had use an understanding of the English language to help make sense of unknown words encountered while reading.
Makes sense of unknown words.
I put make sense of
Well,
unknown
our
words.
reading strategy,
I just put make sense of unknown words. Is that okay?
Yeah.
For now.
We can wordsmith.
Yeah, but I mean, that's that conversation we had, it was great this hour. Right. What's that?
Like determine word meanings and context. Right, that's what it is. Yeah.
What was the first part that you read under there, Carrie?
The one we have at the top.
Oh, it says-
Another, so there were 4, there was academic vocabulary, make sense of unknown words, distinguish between using formal and informal
Yes.
language in a variety of settings, in various settings. Like I was gonna say,
you're responsible for yours and then everything.
they already did it, yeah.
Right, no, I mean, I think we need discrete standards at every grade level. But that's gonna take time. If we're doing it from scratch.
Formal and informal language
Yes,
in a variety of settings.
within various settings. And those were the 4 we had under language skills. Initially.
Where does word study fall?
Broad academic
Vocabulary.
Well, and making sense of unknown words
Right,
too.
okay.
Well,
Not spelling anywhere.
I was gonna say that with capitalization and punctuation.
Isn't that a convention?
Spelling
That's,
is
isn't that a
It
convention?
is a convention.
I'm just saying we haven't mentioned spelling at all, not in writing, not in anything.
So it doesn't matter when you spell check.
I'm fine with
Yeah,
that, really.
flower doesn't always equal flower. No.
Yeah.
Just gonna say it.
Any kind of two.
Yeah.
Common Core's got
But
it.
it is in one of, it is under conventions,
What were
and
the
same with
four-
punctuation,
That's right, yeah.
On the
capitalization.
graduation outcomes, though, what were the 4
Sentence
areas?
structure,
You
yeah.
said again?
Sentence structure, subject verb agreement, verb tense and consistency, and punctuation rules.
Do we wanna?
Want me to write those?
Do we wanna break
Let's
this
write
down
them down.
just a little bit?
Why not?
Again, I'm almost envisioning like at each
Okay.
grade level, like what would fit in each of those
Tell me
categories.
those again, I'm sorry.
Sentence structure,
Right,
subject verb agreement,
Well, see, these are a little bit broader, that's kind of what I was thinking,
Right.
not so much like what is a noun, what is a, like,
right.
those are my,
verb tense and consistency. And punctuation rules.
Good at punctuation and capitalization.
You're really on the capitalization, it really bothers you.
I feel like she's.
How did you
I
cross
was
it?
learning the secondary
Yeah.
edition.
It really bothers you.
Who's the
Why
name
don't we
for that?
just, why isn't,
It's in an
why aren't those two about verbs just,
Yeah, I
Correct-
agree. You can
correct
also
use
put
of verbs.
verbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I mean, we don't have anything about, in there about pronouns.
No, you're right, I like using verbs, merge those two
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
In all situations.
What?
Just kidding.
I didn't hear what you said though.
That's good.
So.
Everybody used to say that all the time, it's just Josh.
Any other, are we missing any broad categories?
Well, what about when we want them to walk away?
Now that we have punctuation.
I mean, I think capitalization probably will have a place at some of the lower levels, I would hope by high school, you're largely mastered.
That's conventions of standard
That's what I'm
English.
saying.
Well, I feel like,
Punctuation is.
I would put it under punctuation, but it's not really punctuation.
I feel like when we think about 612, like this, like here gets you to all those things that came before.
Right.
We're gonna see you
Yes.
continue to apply those.
Yes.
And then as you grow as a writer and as a person, we continue to build your knowledge of sentence structure. We really need to see you do this, the more complex the sentence get,
Right.
and the more sophisticated your writing becomes, and that as well. So like those are the three areas I think we grow in the most, 6 through 12.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like capitalization is one of those things that they don't apply well, but that's because they don't apply it well. That's not because they don't know it.
Well, I'm gonna add what I was gonna say, which is the other one, and I'm thinking from the perspective of someone who looks at a lot of 11 to 12 grade writing and freshman in college, and the ACT test. Pronoun use is another huge one, because
Oh,
she's
yes.
got unclear pronouns, she's got
Yeah.
pronoun case, so I might
And
wanna
that's-
add
They've-
pronouns.
Some of the states have broken it down, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, phrases, clauses, and usage.
Pronoun is huge on 6th through 8th.
I do like, I
Huge
think
in
pronouns.
college.
Phrases and
and
clauses
clauses
like
like
sentence
sentence
structure,
Mine will be talking about two
Yeah, okay,
guys.
so
Yeah.
pronouns.
He
And they
took
wrote
us
down
from hell, and I'm
capitalization,
like,
punctuation, and spelling,
Who's that?
which
Or,
are,
blah, 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 yes.
and all the other things are under.
I kind of like, I don't know, because I appreciate the,
Or
Said
adjectives and
adjectives and adverbs.
I appreciate the perspective of looking at it through writing.
Because they're not as good in there.
Because that's what I would like to see is that we do it through writing.
I like those parts.
Yeah, I like that. What I like about that is I feel like it's really in the service of writing,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's where it should matter, right? Like I feel like that's, and it's about developing that more sophisticated writer all the way through, and so we're not focused on those other pieces as much. Okay, well that was really, that's it. That was a lot faster than I anticipated.
I noticed I'm on the National Council of Teachers of English website, which is
That's
one standard here that we may wanna probably include. Students whose first language is not English make use of their first language to develop competency in the English language arts and to develop understanding of content across the curriculum.
Yeah, I for that too. We need that.
Uh,
And think about what you said about the students using foreign language to understand their studying foreign language to understand the grammar of English. We do that all the time. And we have
We
a
just
lot
might need
more
to make a note
students.
that we probably need to put an ELA standard in there.
Right.
Would that be a standard, or would that just be something we would say like in our principles?
I don't know, but we need to make a note, and get
I
it
see where
somewhere.
you're going.
I understand why NCT
I
did that.
agree, it
Yeah.
needs to be there.
It needs to go
where?
somewhere.
But like, a standard would apply to all students, right? And it's
Right.
more of a, this is what you do in this.
So,
But even if we just make a note of it, so
Yeah.
we won't forget it.
That's fine.
It could be in that overview of
Yes.
our language stream that
Right.
we give, we gotta state that
Yes,
in there.
yes. That would be-
Otherwise, like
Okay.
you said, people are gonna think, what?
Yeah, because I know
That's
this
what
won't
you
pass the mouthful, if we don't put that in there.
Yes.
about ELL students and
Using
language.
native language.
And
Using native
languages
language,
whose first language is
Yeah.
not English, make use of their first language to develop competency in the English language arts and to develop understanding of content across the curriculum.
I think
Somewhere
we're on
next to each other.
proficiency. And we don't want it to be content, we want it to be.
Right.
Right, right.
How the pink always ends up on the line. Anything else?
I'm gonna say it, and I may not even mean it. I mean, just because, again, I'm torn between like language is something on its own, but it's also in the service of writing. But something about like being able to use and choose like precise and vivid language. I mean, we talked about that in writing, so I'm fine if we just want to leave that in writing. But in thinking about like word study and word choice, like to me, right now we have a lot of reading type stuff on there, but there's also that writing element of word understanding. Am I making any sense?
Is that vocabulary?
Right, I was gonna say, that's, we're gonna do that.
Well,
Well, there's one thing, I guess what I'm saying, there's one thing to understand vocabulary when you read it, it's another thing to
still
use
write it.
vocabulary when you write. And I'm fine with just
That
leaving that in the
transfer
writing, but
understanding
Or-
precise and.
Or do you just wanna add,
How about develop and use a broad,
yeah,
develop
just
and
develop.
use a broad
Yes.
Yeah.
broad academic, whatever you wanna say.
We have that. In speaking and writing, you wanna add that to it?
Yes. In reading, speaking, and writing, right? I
Right.
mean, yeah.
Right.
This doesn't need to be just a standalone.
Well, that's right.
It needs to weave.
Right.
they have one in the, Missouri Learning Standards, County Core Standards Standard that I thought of, and then when I saw it in here, it's actually listed as two different ones. It seems to me we do need something about, because we're English, the distinction between language used literally and figuratively, or domain-specific language, or some combination thereof. I mean, yeah, I mean, what do we have here about our language as the language of discussing literature, discussing rhetorical strategies?
Are you talking about the demonstrate understanding of figurative language, word relationships, and nuances?
You're saying having something specific about understanding
Domain-specific
literary
language.
vocabulary,
Yeah.
right?
So that,
And rhetorical analysis.
Rhetorical, yeah.
The vocabulary, the domain-specific vocabulary for our
In the same way
discipline.
that, yeah, science would care about
Right.
photosynthesis, or
Exactly.
social studies would care about citizenship.
Right.
So what are some examples you're thinking of? that we don't
Metaphors.
Well, what was on our graduate
Like
outcome?
her
Rhetorical
You-
questions.
Okay, well, I was wondering where they would live exactly.
Yeah, and we don't have anything up there because that's not academic vocabulary.
No.
Right.
That is domain-specific vocabulary for our discipline.
So just understand the domains, and I don't know if we use that, the
Or like
domain
we use
specific
that, that'll be
category of
confusing.
language arts, or
Right.
understand the
like you're
vocabulary.
talking about literal, cultural, historical,
Yeah, I'm talking more about the vocabulary that we use. If I think of AP Lang, the vocabulary has to do with analyzing rhetorical strategies and terms like parallelism,
Right.
antithesis,
right,
and after, blah, blah, blah. And like I said, in eighth grade, it's metaphors and
Right.
similes,
Right.
and 11th and 12th,
Illusions,
it's
up to a positive.
metonymies. and
So that's where this would live.
well,
I
under the
agree.
vocabulary area.
To the analysis, yeah, ELA is mostly textual analysis is what it is. But it also could be, if it's ELA domain specific, it could be grammar vocabulary.
Right.
That's true.
Right.
Here.
What about demonstrating an understanding of figurative language, word relationships, and nuances in word meanings? I mean, is that what you're talking? Yeah. And that's,
It's Thomas,
Missouri learning.
right, is that what you're getting at?
I'm getting at more what you wrote on the board.
Right.
Like personification, you know what that word means, right?
Specific in the.
It's not gonna be taught anywhere other than in English course.
Right.
Or if
Can
you are gonna
Well, yeah,
teach
so that's the point, right? That like,
Right.
if you're going to understand what that word means, then someone has to explicitly teach it to you, or you need to know how to look it up
Yeah, but there are
online and
nuances
figure out what it
also.
means.
Yeah.
Right, and then the reading, that's what, mean, in the reading standards, we
We
also
have that,
address this,
yeah.
right? Being able to analyze how an author is using that strategy,
Yeah.
but it's one thing,
That's different from the
That's
kind of
from-
thing I'm talking
And
about.
this is still academic vocabulary, it's just very
It's
specific to
specific
the
to-
domain,
Right.
yeah.
literature and composition.
Stanza upon.
Yes.
Right.
And it
Right.
also can be
Bingo.
grammar.
So we need to have something about the relationship of words together, using them, and maybe I don't know the specific language for that, but if you're,
It's grammar.
well,
Word choice.
You're talking like
connotation.
no,
Actually, now that you say that, that is maybe something
but I'm,
there. I actually really like that. I'm gonna say it.
You think we need connotation listed specifically at this level?
Well, and maybe
Or
not
do you
even
want
that
that
specific
as-
word, but something about like understanding the impact of the words you use. That's kind of what I was getting at on the writing side of things, and
Mhm.
speaking side of it too. I mean, but it's like that understanding, even if you don't use the word connotation, denotation, that I'm using this word, but this word is going to create an effect on my on my listeners as opposed to this word. Am I making any sense?
Yes.
I don't know if that needs to live in the language area or if that's just something that lives in the writing and the speaking. I mean, we've kind of said it in writing and speaking, right? Understand your audience, make sure
Right.
you're choosing language.
Yeah,
But we've said several, I mean, all of these really
Right,
are
distinguish
represented in those
Formal
two.
and
So
informal, we use that.
I'm all for leaving it off because I'm a minimalist.
well, and I think,
Standards, but
again, in looking at, I have a pile of different standards and things here. One of the ways it's been broken down is your, command of conventions and everything else would go under that, but then vocabulary and concept development, which everything else, starting with the little kids and using their context clues on down to what I just said earlier that I forgot I said. About 5 minutes back.
honestly, maybe if you just put
Hey,
under
look at the tape.
Carrie,
Where's the stenographer when you need it?
I know I said it.
the distinguish between using formal and informal language, maybe if you just put connotation as in a parentheses, so that when we get to the grade level distinctions, we remember that connotation is something you probably want to talk about on that progression. Does that make sense?
And would nuance be included in there?
Yeah, nuance, like that's the kind of thing I think that can come out from that.
So one of the standards listed, Minnesota maybe, is demonstrate an understanding of figurative language, word relationships, and nuances in word meanings to extend word consciousness. So it's using relationship between particular words, cause and effect, participle, interpreting figures of speech, personification and analogies, and distinguishing among connotations of words with similar denotations.
Does it mention anything on figurative language in there?
Demonstrate understanding of figurative language.
The ELA domain.
Well,
Okay.
I guess so I could argue that I could know what it is, but am I understanding it?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
I can tell you what figurative language is, but can I then understand it when I'm reading it? And I feel like that, I guess it says understand, but see, it says the vocabulary, so.
Understand
yeah,
and
As
use.
long as we spell that out of the progression, I would be fine with it,
That's part of comprehension, it's not just knowledge, so, I know what, I think I know what you're
Maybe
saying, and it's not being
concepts?
able to identify it, it is
Yeah.
understanding it's used, but I think with the word understand.
as long as you
Well,
write that in the progressions,
demonstrate.
I'm good.
Because you're not just saying pick it out or
No.
identify or
Right.
find for me.
Right.
You
Yeah.
could say understand and analyze, but.
No, we do say understand and use, which means I would have to
We
use
want
my nouns.
interpretation. We want the student to be able to interpret the figurative language,
But that,
not just know the definition of a simile or pick one out.
but that's
They
what,
Is it vocabulary or is it concepts? Because it does seem when we're
Yeah,
using
with
the word vocabulary.
Yeah.
We know our vocabulary and concept.
Right, because that takes it deeper,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, okay.
What does it mean in relation to poem or reading?
Right, right.
Within a
Longfellow,
deliberate
what are we
Word
talking
of
about? What
speech
does
The rhyme of the
mean?
ancient
Yes.
mariner, can you apply and understand?
since we split language out, I like that, because then it's like, do you
Uh-huh,
understand
languages.
the label, right? And now in reading and writing, you're gonna apply the label.
Yeah.
All they remember.
But that was what I was thinking, is that you can say this is,
Right.
yeah, find the metaphor, but can I discuss it
And
and,
use it
and
myself.
critique it even, you know? and-
Can you tell what it means?
Yeah, use it in analysis. Okay, all right.
I like
What
it.
else? Anything? Feel really good about what we have.
It's gonna be really hard to cluster this one.
We're not gonna cluster it.
You're not clustered.
Are we not clustering at all? Are we gonna do
Oh, I
like
think we
language
can,
and
okay.
vocabulary? No,
Yeah,
that's
I
good.
think
That's-
I don't need to cluster it.
alright.
Are we good on what was up here?
You could do,
Punctuation,
Right.
verbs and pronouns under
that's what I was
Yeah.
saying, you could do conventions
And
and
then-
vocabulary if you wanted.
Yeah,
Well,
those
that's-
top ones on that second,
Yeah.
nest.
conventions and standard English.
Would that top one be an organizing,
Yes.
that
Yeah,
top
you're right, the
says-
top thing becomes the
Yes.
cluster really.
Right,
Okay, and as far as the space here.
Cause early learning standards has unknown words in this area too, but have we covered that enough?
Yeah,
Makes
I mean,
sense.
so everything in the
Yeah, we've got the
vocabulary,
makes
yeah, makes sense of unknown words.
Okay, so what did you say that they were? They are?
Well, the first one is one of his kind of,
It's kind of the first standard we read at, right?
Right.
Conventions of standard.
unless you
English
have a
grammar.
broader heading for that, just like language use, and then under that comes the
Sure,
the
sure.
standards.
Right.
Yes,
Okay,
Right.
language use.
Language use?
language use.
So is it then like language use, language acquisition? Like could we call the vocabulary, I'm looking at the vocabulary
Why,
standards.
what's wrong with vocabulary?
That's fine too.
Okay, so this goes under that, right?
Yes,
We don't need fancy.
Okay.
and that's a different cluster.
Don't need no fancy.
Yeah, that goes under formal and informal language, yeah, that's language use.
Yeah,
Between using formal and informal.
that's our crossover, our token crossover one for everything.
Okay. Oh, no. Okay, and then everything else is under vocabulary?
Sure.
Do we, what should we decide on spelling?
Comes
That
under,
is part of the convention.
and so the grade level strands would address. Would address spelling issues.
And it'll probably fall under writing as well, applies to that.
Right. And context.
Okay?
Right,
what about distinguish between literal and non-literal meanings of words and phrases?
We have that, cause we have the, figurative, that one maybe needs to specify, understanding and use of vocabulary concepts specific to the ELA domain. You could say including figurative language, yeah, because there are others,
It's gonna
see,
become our-
yeah.
mainstream too though, 'cause like there's that one-
Well,
Yeah, we
and
have that
it's
in the
figurative
reading stream.
language, huh?
We have that under reading too, where they're gonna,
Yeah,
Do
that's what
that,
I was just saying.
And then, they also mentioned the, being able to use a dictionary to determine, unknown words or, I'm just looking, yeah.
Do we have something about denotation
Yeah,
concepts, or do we not put that up?
Through it with,
looking at
vocabulary
annotated
development is what
Yes.
we
decided it
Right.
vocabulary
Okay.
development.
That's what that is, you look up the word in the dictionary for the denotation. So we've got,
Right, you know.
Okay.
I didn't write all those words down.
yeah,
I like it.
Okay. So, from here,
We're done.
how shall we progress? So, cause I'm trying to think about it in terms of, ease and efficiency and whatever, and not having to write everything on paper continuously. Yeah, I was hoping to like finalize them, but like put them in like statements that we really like, and not just these statements that we're like, we can live with that statement, let's move on. But like that we take whatever this is, it's gonna be, we're like, we'll vote on it, like it's the thing that we're gonna use going forward so that it's set and then it's finished. Because, and I think we could, we definitely have time to do that today, so I think we could. It's just about how to do that what's the best way to
Does
do
it
it?
have to be set and finished?
I think it would be great, like, since we have the public hearing next week,
The
to
public
actually
hearing.
say, like, here's the
Right.
strands and the clusters.
Right,
that
I
we-
know we need to make a report, but yeah, I'm thinking I don't think we should make anything set yet. Because I think we can give reports, show them what we've done, I think they'll
Propose.
be pleased. Sure, but I think we need to leave ourselves a loophole here.
Oh, okay,
Because if
right,
something
no.
comes up down the road, we go, oh my gosh, we never even thought of that, we need to come back and put that in, we hung ourselves.
No, I agree with you, but
If
I-
we just put the watermark that says draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what I was thinking was, we're not gonna come back and revisit it again in December, like, we're gonna take it and work
Yeah.
from it, as opposed to coming back and going, okay,
Yeah.
we did all this, and let's go back and look at all over again, like, let's feel good about what we have, so we can go in December. We go, okay, now we're gonna start taking this and working it, we're gonna
Flush it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was what I was thinking, like,
But,
we're
but
happy
we
with it.
still have the opportunity to come back.
Well, yeah,
and-
yeah.
Alright.
I think the whole thing has to be that way until the very end.
You want
calling
this
it a
to
draft.
vote on, these are the strands, these are.
Well, we don't, I kinda would like to see just so we can agree, so we're not,
That's okay.
This is what we're.
yeah, and I think we agree that we have to leave it open, because
And we have
if
enough
there is
people.
something we go, oh, we didn't think about that, I can't imagine
Right.
that we would do that, but we might, like or, oh gosh, we better put that in there, we wouldn't wanna, yeah, I agree with Jill, we would not wanna be in a position where we're like, well, we can't because we said we wouldn't, no, I think we keep it open, but I'm just thinking, it would be really nice if we can all agree that this is the thing that we're working from moving forward, so we can just keep the work going,
Right.
as opposed to feeling like we have to keep going back and talking about it more and more.
So,
I agree, I just keep going back to our integration with K-5, that's gonna throw a little bit of a wrench in it.
I wonder though if it'll help them, I mean, because again, they just they haven't gotten this far yet, and maybe by us saying sort of this is
Here's
what
what
we
we
got so far, maybe that might actually expedite their ability
I
to
think
get
they need
here.
1 or 2 days in November.
I do
don't
think that K through 5 wanted to see our structure, so they could work backwards.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think one of the members
Yes.
posted it yesterday to observe that,
Yes,
So-
one of the members came
Yeah.
yesterday.
yeah, so,
Really?
yeah.
She wanted to see the structure, so they know what to kind of
Cool.
get a feel for K through 5.
Yeah, and when I emailed Tanya, their chair, I said, after today, because I figured it would be better to send it all to her after
Yes.
today.
Right.
That's
Then,
right.
when I sent it to you the first time, because it would have been like a jumbled mess, if I could send them this work,
Right.
that would be something that's like more concrete to look at and go, okay, I can
Maybe we
see.
can have a-
And I asked her, like I said, I think it might be good to have a conversation about how did we get there, what did we do, and so that they can feel pretty good about what we considered and how we drafted it and where it came from, and that some of our conversations did include, like, let's think about what does that look like in elementary, it kind of looks like this, so let's think about, so, anyway, so thinking about refining it and fine tuning it, because I don't know that, well, as it is, that we want it to be this way. We probably want it to be in nicer, more, I don't know, at least like looking at parallel structure, number one, and number two, formalize the language a little bit more maybe, so, in doing that, what makes the most sense? Because only 2 of them are typed, because I didn't take the writing back to type yesterday, which I should have
Because
now
it's not
in
organized
hindsight.
yet. We haven't organized it.
Yeah, we didn't think.
We didn't put it in clusters.
Right, yeah, we did, writing we
I
did,
mean, we just.
No,
Yeah.
no, we didn't.
yeah, we did.
Writing.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, we made our
Right up there on
clusters.
the board.
Yeah, that's what she said, she just had not typed it up.
Oh,
Yeah, we circled them, and,
oh, okay.
yeah, I just didn't, I
Alright,
should have taken it and typed it, and I didn't, so,
Do we have the ability to?
shame on me.
I was gonna say, I
Yeah,
do
okay.
have them typed in the notes and I could carry them over, they're in Evernote, but I could copy and paste them over very quickly
Well,
to a Google Doc or a Word doc if you wanted, and we can get a projector and project it. If someone else would want to do that, or I would be glad to do it for you from here as you contributed ideas.
Alright, and can I make a suggestion?
If you want
Alright,
to
I
project.
think we look at the first set that we did, alright, the very first set, and look at that format, and see if we like that format. And if we like that format, then we could divide up into little groups. One group take the nonfiction and get it from Tori and organize it in that exact same format. One group get the writing, arrange it in that format. One group get the and then we come back together and project them. I mean,
Well, the thing is, the editing would be so much quicker if we could project it.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what, well, I didn't, do you
And
think
we
we have a
can
projector?
use that.
Yeah, if you just tell us
Oh,
what your,
well,
this
if
is.
there's a projector, I can quickly.
And one of the devices is that after you've gotten something, look over, desired conservation outcomes,
Yes.
and align those and make sure that we've covered everything on
So let's
here.
get it typed, let's get it worded nicely, and then let's double check it.
Yeah,
That's a good, okay, so,
I would, can I throw something at you? I mean, we have substantially more speaking and listening, writing and reading standards, right, than we do language. To Jana's point, like if we wanted to do language together as a group right now to kind of model what that looks like, and then we wanted to break into 3 groups, one to take reading, one to take writing, one to take speaking and listening, and divide and conquer, and then come back
and come back
wordsmith.
together.
I think that's the only way we're gonna get it done
I
today.
do too.
Am I making any sense?
well, yeah, except I'm not sure what, I mean, I think we're gonna be, I was thinking all we will be doing is wordsmithing, for the most part, because we've already said what goes where.
Right,
So it's taking it and saying, okay, how do we
but what,
combine them, how do we formalize that?
Sure.
So I was thinking that most of what we will be doing is wordsmithing,
You
so
want just, the list to look pretty much like this?
I don't really care how it looks,
Okay, because
honestly.
we'll eventually have those sentences that come in the heading, you know, and all that, and I don't see a way to get that done today. But I don't understand why with the projector, we couldn't pretty quickly, I mean, this is all parallel, we can do that in a few minutes. You know, these are parallel.
So she's gonna,
We're
she's
just
one,
one.
she thinks that they've got one.
I mean, I'm reading down at every single one of them.
maybe not.
It doesn't matter, I
Let's
wasn't
try it,
sure,
if it's taking too long.
but I'd like to look at the reading one
Yeah.
to start with and say, do we like what we have here, yes or no?
But-
And maybe we do need to, well, I mean, actually, you've already got it typed, so I don't have to retype anything, we could just copy it
Yes.
over and then,
Right.
When we discussed the word C,
Yeah.
we would revisit.
yeah, we have to revisit the word C, we said we would revisit that one.
Like when I visualize this
Mhm.
finished, I know there's several different forms, and I know the one for me the easiest to dig right into and read as a teacher is always the vertical, so I go down and go, oh, 6, 7, 8, I can look across for whatever, if it's reading literary texts.
Yep.
I can look at 6, 7, and 8 and see where my kids need to be,
Yes.
what's expected for that chunk right there. I don't necessarily wanna, like I said, I know it can be in different formats, but for me, for the work here, I think it would be easier to do it that way, to say, okay, we're middle school. We would be, you know what I mean, once we get to
Right, once we
this
get to that part, yeah,
Right
I'm just thinking
now,
about taking what we have and
Right
just,
now, we're just trying to,
and making it prettier than it is, you know, and then taking that to do with the work you're talking about,
Okay.
and to put it
That's our
into
next
those
job.
another way.
grade level progression.
And that's why we're gonna have
I
to
was gonna
work
say,
with
that's
K
probably
through 5 to do
December, right?
that. We're almost gonna have to
Yeah.
work with the K through 5 to do
We are
that
gonna
part.
have to, because I don't wanna be putting something in 6th grade and then they're, well, we have it here in this form.
That's where I see the
So-
dividing by strand and
If
all that.
if I'm understanding what I think we're gonna try to do the rest of today is finalize, that's in quotes though, right? 'Cause we give ourselves permission to add or
Final-
subtract as we
Final
keep going.
second
Let's
draft.
finalize, like
Like we
I've
do.
always used the word anchor standard, but we can call it whatever you want, right? Like the standards that will have vertical progressions once we write them, right? So like this standard within reading literary text is gonna be what we then create a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
Right.
12 progression.
So under that demonstrate command of
Right.
conventions, everything else will fall.
Right.
And that one's probably pretty good already, right?
Right,
That
yeah,
one-
and some of them
I'm
are
like,
already
I'm
okay,
right?
Yeah,
Which
so
we need to turn
I
into
was
like a
like a
standard.
statement,
And those,
yeah.
those will be fairly long. I mean, some of them.
If you wanna have a little bit of meaning and meat to it, yes, we do
Yeah.
need to be longer than just capitalizes period.
Right, so that's what I was thinking, is we would take some of
Because it
those
will
one
increase.
worders and turn them into a statement as opposed to a one word. And that way they, and there's some alignment, so it's not just like we have this ginormous one right there and then we go to punctuation. You know, it's like, so that they look similar. Hi.
Sweet.
So we're talking about doing, and what is Adam talking about, organizing and wordsmithing our proposed drafts for the standards and clusters that will then make vertical lines.
You can shoot, that's fine with me. If I had known, I would have brought another one for my sister. I did last time, and I didn't.
I feel like yours.
Or maybe Carrie just wants to do it.
She's got access to it.
That's, I mean,
She's gonna do it over here.
That just strikes me as you wanna go up higher, like I said, I could do another layer of teacher.
Jeremy, did you say this?
Yep. So that one has one too. I can't find the cord.
We're just gonna protect it there.
Will mine work? Wow, work.
But you have to do it every day.
Oh,
In order to reach,
oh.
it has to be.
Someone left this one on.
Whatever.
Do not shut.
And Jen, I did find the college career readiness, finally, career ready practices.
Let's see.
And a little bit of it is just kind of wordsmithing, but I don't know, maybe there's some spelling errors. Like, financial is spelled wrong. Financial well-being, it's more like tonight. It's career set, yeah.
I just need to get.
Or if you email it, your email.
What are we looking for?
Oh, there's a VG. Ta-da. Why wouldn't it be that? Right.
The letter thing?
Okay, so, what time do you wanna do lunch?
Yes.
I plug her in, too.
Was it too late yesterday?
Yeah, we'll get a
Okay.
system set up.
So.
This.
Did she sit there?
Yeah, oh yeah, I saw her. I figured I needed to.
Yeah, if I can get it to stretch that far, but I can
Okay.
still try.
You know what? We're gonna move at this table, you can move this table that way.
We can move this one down too.
Thank you. I'm just gonna slide it.
This way, so that Carrie can get on the standards.
Career ready practices, CTE, career tech ed. If they're called a common and career technical core. So it's act as a responsible and contributing citizen and employee.
Oh my.
Apply appropriate academic
It
and
won't,
technical
oh, it really won't
skills.
reach.
Attend to personal health.
Will it reach to here, do you think?
Financial
Or do you need to come further?
I can sit there with it on my lap.
Requesting leaves and reasons, things like that.
Well, it'll fall.
With reasons.
Yeah, that's my power.
You guys are.
This is your troubleshooter role, right? It's good to have skills.
Look at that, wow, very good.
Oh, like,
That was shredding.
Work productively.
I was talking to Julie last night, I'm like, I fleetingly got to see Malia.
What?
I wanna get that behind my.
So, my first week here, I truly spent a week just like shredding old speech. I'm like, Dr. Franklin has skills.
That's a good first skill to have.
Just thinking of
They might have an anchor
traits it would take to be a
students should be able to.
Yeah, you're gonna end up.
And later in the
Alright,
sentence,
for real,
maybe
Jeremy, this is the
sixth
part
grade,
of
what does
this
that look
computer.
like?
Getting
Like
it
maybe whereas
Well,
like
it's here,
twelfth grade, what does that look like? Like, cause just to give it use of comma, you know what I mean? So that's what we'll flesh out in the detail.
And commerce too.
You'll get them to pause.
And
Yeah.
Do you need more cable over there? What you may need is just
Containers today, by way of
I could have just said it.
So.
By career tech.
Oh, that's where the girl
Do they have an office in this building?
Right.
It's on there, all of their, everything in
That's
the
what we
building.
do.
It's not financial lines.
That's why very
Like
Like
what
what
is
there is no real.
You would have thought somebody would have thought that.
You know, kind of your standards, is what I'm supposed to happen by the end of the year.
How's it spelled? I know, we've been waiting email.
And I would say it's probably fairly smaller schools tend to have less short and larger schools tend to have more, but it's only because it's not like larger districts have the money to have to go do that.
Oklahoma Chrome.
Right,
My whole family's from Texas.
right.
You know, that was the way to get it to the service.
But
Oklahoma
that's
Chrome.
one
Yeah,
example.
let me tell you, I'm the only one in my family not, so when I published my first novel, I killed everybody.
Day by day, like they will write.
Put you on
Yeah.
East Texas.
And Austin.
And the
Clarksville.
That's what you want, like, parents must watch.
I am still on it every day I watch
Does that make it
this.
difficult to fly?
Not difficult, but
Quarterly, right? So
people are like,
each
don't
quarter
you have an
we
interest in
sort of
weapons of
like,
mass
this is what I'm
destruction? I'm
supposed
like,
to
I thought
accomplish
junior
in
high,
this
of
quarter,
course I
but then
do.
we leave you alone.
But they don't
figure out
think
what you
that's
think the best way.
So, but what was
Hey.
what's
So
the
we're
series
gonna
of
kind of quarterly.
There's Clarksville, DeKalb, Texarkana,
Oh, okay, I know where
that whole area, and then my brother lives in San Antonio,
Yeah.
Austin, I've got a lot of relatives down there.
Right.
I live in Louisville, just outside of Dallas, briefly, they will say I
All
live
in the
in
sense that I think the districts they really
My
want
mom
tight
has
control,
been in
and it's
Missouri
really tight
for,
control,
just
just
like
because
this week,
I
but,
think it's
so
better.
my
I mean,
mom has
personal
been in
take
Missouri
as
for
a teacher and
51 years.
administrator
I bring my own
is that
desk
you've
or
got
what
to
she
teach
finds.
that autonomy,
She's
and if you
just
try to take that away, you
Well,
start to
next
take
time,
it.
through the room.
So I mean, I think you're gonna have to drop the class. I don't know that.
Oh, well, and we didn't ask for one, because we
The
didn't know at this
evaluation.
point, so I just put it on my list first.
That's all it's reading.
I didn't take my screens.
The building level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry about that, we had to tape the cord to my computer so it would stay in.
Be really loose or really tight.
Okay, so we got it set. What we have up here right now is the first, I believe.
Right.
Is this the first one? No, it's not. You're going back to the first one.
Yeah.
Where your veteran teachers. I like it.
I don't know why it says driving. Can you go away? I don't know why it wants to have driving and not work. But it does. It's just been putting away.
It's probably not now, but at what point do we start deciding glossary words?
It'd probably be good if you start
You know
giving
what?
a list
I
of
think
those,
around,
We
right?
can highlight them.
Not necessarily define them yet.
highlight
but keep it running.
that's kind
So
of.
make sure we wanna include.
Sorry, I got the drive out of there, so. Okay, so we start with, let's go back to reading literary text as our first strand, and, can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay,
I can't.
want me to make it bigger, or you just,
No,
your angle's not
my
good?
angle is.
You wanna come down here?
I just wish you. Yeah, well, but then I'll be somebody else's way.
Crisscross applesauce.
I like your
Yeah.
idea. I'm gonna start keeping a list of terms we
I
need
like
to
that too.
eventually define while we
You
do
want
this.
some paper?
If there's any
You want
paper.
I
your
think
paper?
it'll, I have.
There's blank paper right there.
To try to catch them all.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You want a big sheet?
Yeah, that'd be great.
There's a sheet right there that's not been used. Yeah, there's one. Okay, so let's start with the cluster topic or whatever we've got written there, comprehend and interpret text. Are we good with that statement?
Or do we want to say comprehend and interpret literary texts, just so that it's consistent with what?
I like that.
I like-
Literary text.
Well, I was gonna say, I like actually keeping literary out because I would like to think the same cluster is what we're gonna use for the informational text.
Well, that's what we currently have. We currently have the informational text has the same clusters unless we decide to change it, but.
Okay,
Which, anyway, you're right, you could do that
do
too.
we want it
I don't feel
plural
strongly.
text?
Maybe we don't.
So one thing we ultimately, of course, need to define is what do we mean by literary text?
Okay.
I'm just adding it to this list.
So are we adding literary text in front of, or literary to the text in the,
I don't think we need
No.
to, we've
I don't
already
think we
said.
need
Okay.
to
But do we
personally,
wanna
but-
make texts plural or not? Are you using the singular as a complement?
it doesn't.
I think it's over interchange.
Okay, so we're good with the way it is.
Mhm.
Okay, so then our first bullet is cite relevant text-based evidence to demonstrate understanding. Anyone have any issue with the wording there? Okay,
I think the next one should say determine word meanings in context, because
do we wanna have literal and figurative in parentheses?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we wanna know what we've got on reading? I know skills,
Yeah.
or do we wanna wait and get them all done and then crosswalk these?
Let's go through these and then let's crosswalk those. Is that okay? Cause that way we can,
you're talking about the skills we listed initially.
Yes, the graduation outcomes.
yeah. So what about determine author's purpose?
Alright, so here, I don't wanna derail this already. I have no qualms with the way that's written, but what I'm wondering if what we also need to be doing here is starting to figure out, are there ways we can combine some of these statements together? Because right now, I mean, just in reading literary texts, we have, like 15 different
Yeah.
skills we say we want kids to do? And multiply that by 5 strands, we're already up into the 80 to 90 standards range.
And we'll have to do that in writing, cause writing is like, has a bazillion things, so we'll have to do that with writing.
Like
But yeah, for
levels,
here.
I think no more than 4 or 5. I guess that's
for
how
each
we
one.
utilize it.
Like, are you saying combine, determine author's purpose, themes,
Maybe, yeah, that would be a potential example,
cause those could,
but I tend to agree, if you get more than about 10 standards per
Right.
strand,
right,
we've lost them.
Could you do purpose, theme, and tone in one?
Tone is not even
Oh,
up
you have
there.
tone down there under
Like
craft,
that one.
Alright,
but purpose and theme could go together.
A word choice. And I did have a question,
could
are
we
we
even
ever,
combine it with words,
are we
meanings,
ever
and
going
context?
to, how we
No, those are
approaching the
always
text as a
separate.
reader, as an author,
I don't know.
are we gonna put
Oh,
that
yeah,
anywhere?
I like that.
Because that could go under the cluster, like cluster 1, you know, maybe in parentheses, it's the approaching the text as a reader.
Right,
Or was that gonna go in the guiding principle?
Well, let's put it here for now, so we don't lose it.
right,
That's fine with me, cause that way we don't lose those, cause eventually I'd like to have some of the paper not be up anymore.
And if that's important, it needs to be there because, I mean, let's be honest, how many people are actually gonna keep referring to the guiding principles once they go on?
Right, right.
teaching best to student teachers right now.
Right. They just get to me, get to the word.
Okay,
Tell me
so
what to do. Yeah.
are we going with determine author's purpose and theme?
And we're taking that in there.
Should I put in the theme of a text?
No.
No, just, oh, okay.
We did have identified them.
Well,
I
determine the
think you
author's
have to
purpose.
identify it though.
Identify the themes. Could we put the next two together, because the summary would be a summary of the significant details.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Summarize text, recognizing significant details and drawing logical.
Yes,
inferences.
yes.
Wait, yes.
I don't like summarize as its own item. Because I feel like it's, I mean, I know it's really important, but I feel like it's always, it
It's too
includes so
much.
many other things and it's.
If you summarize, it's the major elements, right? The
Yeah,
significant
the
details.
but
And we always
Yeah.
have them do more than just
Yeah.
summarize. Usually.
so if we list summarize, are we gonna leave it straight?
I liked what Nancy suggested. What you suggested?
Just combining them, summarize text, comma,
Recognizing
recognizing significant details and drawing logical inferences.
Just where my mind is going to.
So summarize text, recognize significant details and draw them.
Recognizing and then drawing logical inferences.
Isn't the last one kind of the first one?
And I
Drawing,
Also drawing logical conclusion.
Right.
Don't you love to be the one?
I mean,
Yes, and,
yeah, the last one's interesting because it's not even really a standard so much as it's a learning goal. Like that's something you
Right.
need to do. You could almost put that like
That almost
out,
goes in your guiding, or not in your narrative piece.
Right.
You know, that they're gonna read on.
or like a description of what is the strand about. The strand is about reading a wide range of literary texts appropriate.
So maybe it goes under here.
Just defining what does this mean. It means
What's the
Yes,
third
put
cluster?
summarize on there.
The third one,
There's
yeah.
all research and
Okay, what you could
paraphrase
do
and
is
summarize.
take that one, the wide range, and put it down there and then see if you can combine it with something. I don't know, I'm just
Oh, I
saying,
see what
that's
you're
where it goes, it goes in
Yeah,
cluster
it
three,
does, you're
that's the problem. So we can eliminate summarized text.
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, I see it before.
And then-
I almost agree, I mean, I guess unless you want this to be left as a standard all the way through, I almost agree that could be
Well, it goes
an
under,
introductory piece.
it goes under cluster three.
We identified it as cluster one when we first did it.
Yeah, I
And-
know.
Weren't you gonna put and comprehend? Read and comprehend?
That's what we have on the other one, and that's what makes it under number one. Read and comprehend.
Right, this is the basic.
You just want them
We
to
did that
read
for
them or you want them
nonfiction.
to understand them?
And that's what we did with, for nonfiction, we added comprehend so that it would fall under comprehend and interpret text.
So see
Um,
that sentence where, that last one, read a wide range of literacy? Don't you want them to read and comprehend?
yeah, but I think what we're saying is like when you think about like that particular skill as opposed to the other four we looked at, like you're not really gonna break that out by
It's
grade
not the
level.
same
You know what I
grade
mean? Like
level.
at every grade
There's
level.
not gonna be a progression of that.
There's that's what I'm
It's the
saying.
same thing.
So I don't know that it belongs as a standard so much as a just
Well,
this is
I'm not gonna say I don't think it
Sure.
belongs as a standard, but I don't think it belongs as a standard under comprehend and interpret text. That's why I suggested moving it to cluster three, which is about reading multiple texts and seeing relationships among them.
right. I guess what I'm proposing is maybe what if we called it like a goal, a strand goal? I guess I'm trying to differentiate between like a learning skill that kids are gonna learn as opposed to like this is a goal of this strand, like the ultimate,
A
everything
guiding
on this
principle?
list, right, is trying to get you to be able to read and understand a wide range of literary text appropriate for your grade level.
I mean, yeah, cause
That would be hard to do vertically.
well, I mean, there is no progression in there.
Right,
It's the
there's
same
nothing.
thing at every level, right? We want them to read and comprehend text, a wide range of literary text appropriate for the grade level every single year, and that is the thing every single year.
So maybe we put that as a guiding principle.
It's getting kind of close to curriculum. It's not,
I
it's
mean,
not, it's
that-
close.
If
Well,
that's our
and-
broad goal.
I mean, I do, to
That's a standard.
Marizella's point, right? I don't wanna take it out of our document because then you can teachers can say, well, I only wanna teach this, and it,
I have
that
teachers at 12th
expectation
grade that
isn't
teach
there.
only Cormac McCarthy for a whole course in fiction.
Right.
It happens.
But I think they're gonna gonna do that anyway.
But I guess what I'm saying is I just don't think that that's a skill standard so much as it's just a learning goal, I don't know what we wanna call
They
it.
don't have time, yeah.
Well, you've gotta think about how you're gonna measure it.
And you wouldn't, I mean, you
We don't
wouldn't
have
measure
to
Well,
it.
it does get
measure
measured.
I guess, I mean, you would measure it like,
It's measured when you present students with on grade level
Right.
text,
And
and
like
ask
when
you to
you're-
do something with it.
and when you're creating an assessment, we would be using a wide variety of texts that we'd be assessing you on.
Right.
But it's still not a
Like your
skill
mentor
progression.
text set.
Well, when I think about what we're working toward, and we're working toward a progression, when I think about working toward a progression, that doesn't fit, because there's no progression.
That's what I'm saying. Unless you go, which I don't wanna do, but unless you go into like, what does it mean to be a sixth grade reading level? And then I don't wanna touch that with a 10
Okay, I
With Jana's idea of it being a guiding, would you say a guiding
An
principle?
overarching idea or
What if
guiding
in-
principle.
What if inside relevant text-based evidence based on a wide range of literary texts to demonstrate understanding? Or we somehow put it in to
Well,
where it's,
Because it applies to all things, right?
Well, and to that point, I mean, we're gonna have this issue with every strand, right? Like this right here is something that's in the same boat, right? Like it's a broad statement that is true at all levels, but then the devil's in the detail when you get to some of these more specifics.
Can you go down to the third cluster for just a minute, scroll down to that? And what we have under that one now is a group of standards that have to do with relationships among texts. And I'm still wondering why this one, and it may need to be reworded a little bit, but couldn't be somewhere in there that if you are going to identify relationships among texts and analyze those and explore those, compare, contrast them,
Pass that around.
wouldn't you wanna make sure that there was a range of texts? that
Right,
came
be
together?
well read across the.
That's-
Yeah.
I don't understand why it can't be there.
Right, cause we can,
Alright.
it could be novels or academia.
you have it?
And-
Okay, yes, you have
So,
it.
If
So-
you wanna make it measurable, do we want students to independently read and comprehend a wide variety of grade level texts? Is that our goal?
Yeah, I think we may have something that
Yeah.
addresses this here.
so what do you have here?
Okay, so pulling from that South Carolina, one thing they did that I liked, if you look at where they put under their reading strand of understanding and using literary text, for that first standard for them, they wrote down the student will read and comprehend a variety of literary texts in print and non-print formats. And then that carries through to each grade level, and then underneath it, they
Head
have.
description.
That's what I
To
like.
say
what's
that
in
another
there.
way,
that's what it is.
They sort of create, the strand itself is a standard, and then all of these other standards are within that.
Within that
That's
one.
what I was
And
trying
now
to
when you have it there, is that,
last
is that,
statement in the yellow box.
That's what it is.
It would be like up
Should
here.
continue to address earlier indicators as they apply.
So read that statement.
Yeah, read it again.
Okay, the student will read and comprehend a variety of literary texts in print and non-print formats. That's it. And then the yellow box
Yes.
spells out, students in grade 8 read 4 major types of literary texts: fiction, literary nonfiction, poetry, drama.
Here's what that looks like.
So, like, it would almost be like, for reading literary text, our whole goal for that is that they read and comprehend a variety of literary texts in print and non-print. And in order to do that, they have to be able to do all these things under cluster 1, all these things under cluster 2, all these things under cluster 3.
Yes.
Yes. And I think then that eliminates the need for it to live other places. I don't know, I just
Yeah,
like
no,
how
I
it was
agree,
worded.
I'm with you.
What do we think about
So
that?
it could be like a subheading, so to speak, right underneath that literary,
But it's
reading
so
literary
But it's
text.
still,
Right.
yeah.
Because if you
don't
get,
need
It's
it
like
at all, once
whatever
you
you wanna
said
call it,
that,
learning
you
goal,
eliminate
guiding
the
principle.
bullet.
Right, that's not,
Objective.
Right,
and
right.
it's the same, you go to grade
Alright.
6, English 1.
okay, so maybe it's,
Or you could call it an object, I don't know, I don't wanna go there,
Right.
I've already said,
Yeah,
it. Taking it back.
Do we need to address reading independently at all?
I think that's given, maybe, I don't know, maybe, do you need
no, cause that's
students will independently read it?
Yes.
That's
It's
kind
an
of,
Well, I know that's
expectation of
one
the
reason why they added a standard 10 and
So you're just
core.
saying like, should the word independent come in that
But no,
statement?
I don't think it should come in the top, no, I don't.
No.
But should we address,
It would come in the third cluster.
Like read independently for extended period of time for pleasure. could that be
Not
It needs to be reading
I
independent
mean, also
criteria.
they talked about putting those
Yeah.
metacognitive things in
Yeah.
guiding principles.
Yes.
Maybe
Alright.
that's
We
where
start
they
talking
get-
about
Yeah.
building stamina and things
Yeah.
like that.
And
all
independence.
are- It's not a standard, it's.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, so we have 4 items, I feel good about having 4, that's.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Good.
Okay, so then keep this in mind up here for every other strand we have, because we don't want them to look goofy and have like one for reading literary and nothing else, so. Okay, so then under cluster 2, we have analyze, craft, and structure.
And you can eliminate identify and, because if you analyze, remember the old rules,
Yeah.
Right.
you've already done all
Right.
that.
So the analyze, craft, and structure, we go with the way that's worded?
Yeah. Craft makes the list.
Okay, so we're gonna
Structure
go
makes the list.
analyze how the overall structure contributes to the text.
Analyze makes the list.
Analyze narrative point of view.
Merge.
Okay, you guys maybe type all that out and now I just deleted it, thanks. Just kidding. Alright. Analyze.
Where we.
Okay, so analyze how the overall structure contributes to the meaning of a text. Analyze narrative point of view. So stop me if you don't like the way any of these are worded.
Could tone, word choice, and syntax go with narrative point of view? I mean, I know they're distinct, but could they also? Maybe.
Analyze how word choice, figure of language,
Just throwing it out for consideration.
I can see putting tone with narrative point of view,
Right.
but I would
But I
leave
see
word
what you're
choice and syntax as a separate, so I would.
Let's leave them separately.
Narrative point of view.
you know, I'm kind of questioning right now about that identify and analyze the structure. Because on structure varies in complexity.
Right.
You have sequential structure, which is easier.
Yeah.
Then you have your cause and effect structure. Then you have your compare and contrast structure. And I think teachers need a little bit of guidance on which structures need to be covered at which
Well,
grade levels.
And I think we're using structure even more liberally than you are. I think we're really using it to say organization and structure. I mean, we
And
need
they're
spell
going
that
to,
out.
depending on what text they select, it's gonna vary, so, and
Well,
we're
that's
not gonna
true.
tell them that.
But you teach students how to determine structure of text.
Yeah, but that's what that says. Unless I,
Well, there are different types, there's
yeah,
several
there are
different types.
types, but that's,
But this is literary text too, right? So I mean,
yeah, and there are
there's
different
a bunch of
structures.
different types.
Right, when you get into informational text.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this,
I think narrative point of view is gonna have to be up there.
Yeah, yeah.
it is.
Falling down on the
The
top.
author's point of view.
Oh,
would
we
be
have a
totally
comma after setting and
different.
standards. Sorry.
I was wondering if there was a way to combine some of that even more, but
Which one?
just, I don't know, I don't know.
Yeah, it's all analyze. Well,
Well, you can add that tone, word choice, syntax, I guess, to that.
No, I don't like adding it to the other one, cause I feel like there's, it's not always narrative point of view that we're looking at word choice and
Right.
syntax, so no, I agree with keeping it separate.
I think we need all of them.
It's
Can't really combine and find them anymore.
and right now it says analyze, but I think that when we take it to that progression, it will look a little different. The wording should be a little bit
I mean,
Now,
better.
as a
But at the end,
writer of novels, I wanna ask you, does it bother you, you've got analyze the interaction, plot, setting, and character. There's nothing specific about conflict, and without conflict, there's no.
that was part of the
I would thought,
I
yeah.
know.
Is the
The whole
conflict
plot
inherent in the
development,
plot though?
climax, denouement.
But it's okay that that word isn't used, okay.
It could be empirical.
okay, so are we
Because there's
okay
a lot of
with
influence
craft and
building.
structure? Can we move on to the third cluster?
Not this.
Do you, I think this is just formatting, do we need to say to the meaning of the text behind the three middle ones, or is that implied? They just seem different. So like, analyze how the overall structure contributes to the meaning of the text, as opposed to just analyze narrative point of view.
analyze how narrative point of view
That's what I'm
contributes to the meaning
asking.
of the
I don't
text.
feel
That's
strongly,
what
I'm just
I said.
asking, like, do we need to standardize that across those standards? Like, you
It
know,
would be
why
more
are you
precise
analyzing?
to say, analyze how narrative point of view.
That's kind of what I'm
contributes
getting,
to
like,
the
Yes.
why are you analyzing?
Yes, that's true.
But is that all,
Yeah.
is that all?
That
That is that all
That's
they're
fair.
doing.
I guess what I'm saying is
If you analyze it, you are automatically
Well,
determining how it contributes to
I'm
the
not sure
that's
we need it
inherent.
on the
so then do we
Could I
need to
just
then
say,
then
yeah,
pull it out of the first one?
Could we
analyze
just,
the overall structure.
Exactly.
I guess, I'm gonna argue that I don't wanna take it off the first one. And the reason I don't is because I feel like, and we will probably take care of that here, but, adding that contributes to the meaning of the text help us take it one step further.
Right.
Whereas we were looking before at just what is the structure of a text or how is it structured, how is it organized, instead of thinking about how it services the meaning of a text, which is really important,
Right.
which is beyond, well, this has chapters, or it has headings, or it has,
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
about why we do it.
And
So
Yeah,
I'm
that's why you
leaving
add it to
it
the
there,
other
but
one.
it
I
seems
was
really
thinking we need to
redundant.
add it.
Yeah, I
Add
understand
it.
what
I
you're
know.
saying, the other ones I get, fine, that one bothers me, that if it comes off, then it changes.
I think we
it
should leave
needs
it
to be
the way it
added
is.
to the others.
All of, I do
but
too.
believe me,
I
when you
really
go
do.
into
Well,
districts
because
and you
we've
leave
said
it
it
just
again
like
on the
that,
bottom one.
that means they
I mean, it's
identify.
all about the
They
relationship
don't
that
know
it has to
identify
everything
versus
else.
analyze.
You would think they
South
would.
Carolina does.
Well, we need to put that on the list.
Does or doesn't?
Analyze, what
Yes.
analyze?
Does.
I mean,
Because we've said it again
But
on the
that's not what
bottom
I'm
one.
talking about, I think that, I just think that we have to help teachers see that it's not about breaking down a text and looking at how it is structured, it's understanding how that
Yes.
contributes to the overall meaning.
But I would say the same thing about narrative point of view
Sure.
or plot. It's not just
Sure.
about being able to break down the plot, it's how
How it
it's
all-
written.
Can I read just, this might help us clarify how to put this together.
Sure.
Okay, this is just a blurb from Massachusetts, one of them or something. It says, the identification and analysis of elements of fiction, and then they have plot, conflict, setting, character development, and foreshadowing, make it possible for students to think more critically and respond to them in a more complex way, and reflect on their meaning to be able to compare them to each other.
There's that thinking word again.
I thought it was a good way to kind of put it together.
So,
See what I'm
What would,
saying?
yeah, so I'm
Yes.
trying to figure out what would I do with that? Where would I
Goes in our
where do you want me to
narrative.
put
Yeah, I
that?
was gonna say, that seems like good for the
Introduction.
narrative.
It does
Well,
seem
why don't we
right,
just
it does
take-
seem like a good piece for a narrative.
Analyze how literary devices contribute to meaning, take the contribute to meaning and put it with the others. Narrative
Yeah,
point of view
that's what I
contributes
was
to
asking.
meaning, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
contributes to meaning.
Yes.
We can do that.
Which, like you said, does seem kind of redundant.
Yeah, but it's not that contributes to the meaning,
Right.
it's not that.
Well, and again, when we flesh these out by grade level, they will be different, you know, I mean, there's different substance there in each of those, even though they're all, I mean,
Now, go back to, what's that missing stuff based on what you said, cause I was.
Okay, let me read it again. It says the identification and analysis of elements of fiction, plot, conflict, setting, character development, and foreshadowing. Make it possible for students to think more critically, get a typo, about stories, to respond to them in more complex ways, to reflect on their meanings, and to compare them to each other.
Okay, and I think we have that part, the first part of that with cluster two, and then comparing to each other is cluster three. Seems to like it's.
Or you could say like like South Carolina says in analyze how the interaction with plot, setting, and character. Analyze the development of an interaction, and then you have to think about, are we looking at the development of it, or are we looking at
I know,
how it
that's,
contributes to the
Yeah,
meaning?
that
I think
one is a little
you could
weird.
say we're looking at the development of the plot, setting, and the character.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily what I'm looking at when they get to the end of K-12. What we're looking at is how do those things work together? How does one propel the other? How do they interact? So it's truly how they interact.
Which is
Not
why they
just
use
development.
identification in the beginning,
right.
Yeah.
and then they get to the very end where it says now they can compare them to each other.
Because, we really wanna see, don't want them to see them as isolated
Right.
items in
This
tests.
is,
This is the end.
how they relate. And that's gonna of
okay
course
the
look
way it is.
different once we get into the grade levels.
Are we good there? On number 2? Are you ready to look at number 3? Okay, so 3, integrate, we need to fix that. Integrate ideas and see relationships among text.
You want tone up there also.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Great. See relationships.
Recognize relationships.
Articulate.
Can we just say make
Explain.
connections
Explain
within and among text?
I like explain.
Like, is the cluster name make connections within and among texts?
I guess
Integrate ideas.
the within among is one thing to debate, but yeah, regardless if we do within or among, yeah, make connections among, I don't know,
Well, what's wrong with explain relationships?
explain relationships among.
Because if you think of asking students to compare, the future views of the world and Brave New World in 1984, that's what they're doing. They're explaining how those are related, how they compare and contrast.
Are they interpreting?
Yeah, I was thinking they might even be getting to that
Going.
analysis
Yeah, but you would analyze the text to explain the
to
relationship.
explain
It seems to me.
relationships.
Or you could draw a conclusion. I mean, I like also, yes, I agree with that, you do. And then, I mean, also you can draw a conclusion and make inferences. And I think that's an important one, the inferences, because that's a lot of literature, you know, what is not stated, but,
Right,
you know,
right.
so.
That needs to be up and if we don't have that number 1, that's what it's
We
supposed to be.
Right.
We do.
Okay.
I mean, if you wanna use Bloom's language, you could just say synthesize, like synthesize
Right.
ideas among texts.
Right.
I mean, we've used analyze and comprehend,
Because we're, yeah,
um,
we're concluding,
Right, because then we're.
The right word there. Well, I do,
Well,
because
it's
you're
what we
not
asked students
to do.
synthesizing them to pull them together.
Sometimes you're simply just giving an explanation.
Right.
You're not necessarily
Expository.
concluding
Yeah.
or making something new.
Thinking of
Synthesize
the
implies to
DOK
me, you
though.
pull it together to come up with your own new thing, rather than explain, this one is like this one in this way, it's different in this way.
okay.
What if you put synthesize information and ideas to determine relationships among texts?
Are you talking about the
Overarching.
title of the cluster?
The whole thing.
That's true, that first standard really
Synthesize
could become the
information and
cluster title.
ideas to determine relationships
Oh,
among
yes, I
texts.
see what you're saying, yes.
What if you put that at the whole thing? Cause isn't that what you're doing?
I would just
Yeah,
say
integrate and synthesize. it.
So if you just put it
Yeah,
up
what are
there,
better words?
synthesize
category,
information and ideas.
sections.
So, okay, then I'm gonna have to go back and redo the other 2 clusters because they don't look anything like that. So just say,
Wait, what?
I don't
No,
think,
on
you know.
that, on that heading,
Okay, so synthesize,
synthesize information and ideas to determine relationships,
Well, that's
to
long.
determine relationships, wait a minute, give it a chance,
I pulled it up.
among texts, and then erase the rest.
What's wrong with just using the, I don't even care about synthesize, but what's wrong with using that first standard, like explain
synthesize
information
information from multiple texts.
from multiple
But you're
texts?
looking for relationships, Nick.
Well, but
You are,
synthesizing.
and you're
That's what
synthesizing,
you're
I mean,
looking
you're
for.
doing all of these things, but
Deeper than I.
You're not just pulling stuff together and putting it into a report. You have to look for those patterns and those relationships.
sure.
That's what I
No,
use.
you can't make that
The
jump.
synthesis is the highest form
It is,
of,
but
so they
it
have
is,
to
but
be
you
able
have to,
We can
it
add it
is,
to our
but you
glossary.
have to look for relationships among the information too.
Right.
Synthesizing is pulling it all together, but you have to look for those relationships.
When you're synthesizing, don't you see the
I
relationships?
do like ideas.
Not
and
necessary.
information. Synthesize ideas.
Not. What?
So, should we get rid of, well, I guess we
I
not,
would get rid of that.
get rid of this bullet and just change it to
I think it's
synthesize
implied.
ideas from multiple texts?
Yeah, you don't need information.
Right,
Just ideas.
Ideas,
Like.
synthesize ideas
And then
among
the little
texts.
things
From
you-
multiple texts.
and then
From
the
multiple
skills would
texts?
fall under, we can put that on there, but I just.
Yeah, because everything under there requires you to look beyond just the other text you were looking at, right? I mean, it forces you to look at
I still
other
think you need
genres
the
or
relationships in there,
pieces or cultural context.
but I still
But
see,
won't that be implied by the standards that we've written
I
there?
really think it
I really think if you don't put that idea of the relationships, the cause and the effect, a cause and effect is a relationship.
But what would be doing that through the progression?
Yes.
Identifying, like spelling those
It's
out?
gonna be a
Yeah, I
standard.
think so.
It'll be more specific within each grade level,
Yeah,
is how I envision it.
Cause I feel like we have to help them see those relationships, but that will be through the progression.
So then we could take off the first.
Oh yeah, I'm
bullet,
sorry.
And then we'd only have three.
Right. So the more we streamline it here, the better.
I think those three should stay
yeah, oh yeah,
where they are.
So determining, you guys, determining a relationship that exists between two texts is not a very, very important skill.
Well, we've got compare and contrast,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it is, because.
and we're comparing, contrasting them with their forms,
Right.
their themes or topics.
Yeah.
Compare and
That is-
contrast,
So you're
That
saying
is-
you'd rather it say like determine relationships instead of compare and contrast? Determine relationships among texts in different
texts.
forms?
That would give you the room to do more than just
I don't know.
compare and contrast.
compare and contrast is
think
just a
that's
form
too
of
limited.
analyzing.
Limiting.
I think that
I'm
would
not
belong
opposed
more
to
in
that.
the
I mean,
individual grade levels.
There's
Yeah.
something missing
Depending
up
on
there
which one you're
huge.
That's
talking
right,
about.
that's true.
But compare and
I
contrast
think
language?
Right.
Yeah.
Or make the connection.
I'm only kind of hearing you,
Right.
so you're gonna have to say it again, sorry.
I said, I feel like that use of compare and contrast here belongs more in a specific grade level.
Yeah, I
Right,
like that
so
progression.
what Janice said, we can change that to, how were you phrasing that?
Determine
Determine
relationships.
When you
relationships.
pull together information and you look at data, and you look at all cluster of data,
I'm still a little lost,
You
so.
can still
Alright.
say
Saying get rid of
determine.
compare and
always-
contrast.
Right.
So
On
instead
both,
of compare and
you
contrast,
always
Determine
ask,
relationships.
pulling together,
Determine relationships.
Among texts in different
Among
forms.
texts.
you have to.
because that gives.
Pulling
room
together
for compare and
information is
contrast.
one piece, but the next piece is seeing how they're related.
Right.
That's your second level.
Texts in different forms.
Okay, so
And then there's the genre and the media.
I'm gonna put genre, okay, so it's replacing the first one.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at, I didn't understand where we were, they both say compare and contrast, that's why I was getting lost. Oops.
And would the same thing apply for the second standard as well? Determine relationships among texts that address similar themes and topics.
I think so.
Okay, but is determine a strong enough word?
First is the word thing.
I have a copy.
So you could switch it to analyze, right? Analyze relationships
So-
among
No.
texts.
Because
No?
Because you have to know the relationships before you analyze them.
It's determined to.
But we're at the highest level, like what we're
Yes.
saying is if we're synthesizing ideas from multiple texts,
Yes,
we should be at the highest
Yes.
level of verb
yes,
here.
but
Design, connect, synthesize, apply concepts, critique, analyze, create, prove.
So those
But
are
if
our
you're- if
four.
you're-
I don't want us to have the lowest verb here because we're at the
Right.
end, so it should be whatever the,
Right.
yes, we have to
Alright,
determine relationships
then-
first,
then you
but
then you analyze text to determine relationships.
So can you critique?
How?
Evaluate.
Evaluate relationships.
Relationships among texts.
Evaluate texts to determine relationships.
Evaluate text to determine relationships.
You evaluate your text, you don't evaluate the
Yeah, I agree.
relationships.
Now that I said it.
Evaluate text to determine relationships.
Interpret.
You evaluate the text, not the relationship.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's gonna get
Like,
really
Evaluate
wordy.
text to
And
determine
we're not gonna have
relationships.
a place to make
No,
It's gonna get really wordy.
I still don't see what's wrong with explain what the relationship between these two texts is.
I think just the wording that it's lower on the DOK, so.
Yeah,
Well, the determine feels, like determine to me feels lower,
It
am I?
is lower.
So
It's just like you
I don't wanna set that
identify.
identifier, so I'd like us to take
I
it,
think
if we're
for
thinking
both
about,
of us,
this is what we're reaching for in the end, so
I
what
like
is it that we're reaching
critique.
for in the end?
I like critique
I
as
like
well.
critique, is critique this.
Critique relationships.
But you're not critiquing relationships, you're critiquing the text to determine the relationship.
Right.
You're not critiquing the relationship.
So then it's too wordy. You
It's
are
too wordy.
analyzing the text.
That's true.
You could analyze text to determine relationships.
Discriminate.
Discriminate?
Relationships.
No.
Categorize. Classify. No. Examine.
What if you just put,
Examine's a level 3 word for examine
Conclude.
relationships.
what if you just put analyze text to determine relationships and leave it at that?
Analyze text, forming
I don't know.
It'd be the relationships
But
among them, between them. Well, I guess
You may
they
just
haven't
get rid of
really.
that
Alright,
form
so
as a-
analyze-
Analyze various texts or
It's true.
See, I like the second bullet better,
What?
picking that better one.
What if you just put analyze text to determine relationships? That way you're not closing it to anything, it
But
could
What
be
kind
anything.
of
But we
relationship?
do wanna.
Cause and effect,
What about
How are
analyze
they-
and explain relationships?
how
That's
does it,
not what we're talking about. We're
well,
talking about
there's several
how
things.
texts are like and unlike each
We're
other.
talking about intertextual.
Yeah, intertextuality is what we're talking
Yes.
And explain
Well-
relationships among text, that way you get your explain in there,
I
but
know,
you're
I
also
like-
analyzing.
That's what you do.
But it needs to,
Analyze and explain relationships among
It
texts.
says it this way, discuss the relationships between, that's
That,
what it
I
says.
think the way you have it now, look at the top, I think that looks pretty good. Analyze and explain relationships.
Well, I think I would say
analyze
explain
and
and
explain,
analyze.
because then
Analyze and explain.
Well, you have to
Analyze and
analyze
explain.
first before you can explain the relationships. You can't explain if you don't know what they are. You have to analyze the
isn't
text.
identifying.
You have to identify it first, right?
Consider
You don't
relationships.
analyze the text and then determine the relationships and then explain them? You don't
You don't
analyze the
analyze and
text?
explain the relationship, you analyze the text and then you.
That's what
explain
I
the
just said.
relationship. Well, that's not what that says.
No, it's not.
So that's the problem.
You analyze the text to determine what the relationships are,
personally like to
and then
say
you explain
synthesize
them.
relationships
And
among texts.
to
in different
synthesize
forms,
is a
like
level
synthesize
four.
relationships.
Yeah.
Or you could do the
Or
analyze
bottom
and
line.
then synthesize,
Yeah,
because
even
you're
better.
looking at it from kind of a.
What is it we want them to do?
Explain the
Can
relationship.
you articulate what you want them
It's
to
like
do?
comparing contrast, really.
Because
Well,
I mean-
that's, I know, that's why I didn't see what was wrong with that, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
We want this,
Because
so,
it
so okay,
does
I'll use it as an
fall
example,
from
right? So if I'm teaching Romeo and Juliet, right? I want them to be able to, we're gonna talk about the script, but we also wanna see a production of it and talk about that. And we maybe wanna pull in an nonfiction article about what's happening in Palestine, right? And so we're pulling all of these different texts together so that we can understand overall, like what is the central text of Romeo and Juliet, what is it telling us and how does it vary in different media formats and how do different texts, yeah. Like synthesizing is what
Well,
I'm
it's
doing.
really
Right.
But you're understanding.
Right, but I'm also, yeah, by synthesizing, I'm also understanding, analyzing, comprehending, like all of that's implied.
All right,
That's
Nick,
why it's the end result.
what
it's the
about-
end thing.
compare and contrast text to determine to synthesize information.
Well, but what I think is most important about the standard is actually the different forms and the similar themes and topics.
Right, you're not synthesizing, this is not a research paper where
Right.
you're reading Romeo and Juliet and then you're reading
Well,
another text in a different format and then you're putting that, you're looking at how they are alike and unlike and why some
all
of the
right, well then
choices
to
were made.
determine relationships. Compare and contrast text to determine relationships.
Relationships.
So
about
I guess I don't agree
How they're
with the
aligned.
relationship thing anymore. I'm kind of moving away from that, okay?
Right.
Because that's not the only reason we
That's
do
right.
it. You know, I mean, we're looking at, there is a relationship, that's probably why we're giving you the text to begin with. So, and we want you to see how they're related, yes, that's just one piece.
I know.
We do, but I really want you to finish this because I don't wanna come back and hear this out again, so. And I don't wanna get hung up on what, I feel like a lot of what we're talking about is what's gonna be fleshed out in the progression. So we need to be careful about that as well. So I keep thinking, what, at 12th grade, what is it really that I want them to be doing with this when they're Cause this is the end, right? So what do I want them doing with this at the end?
And that's strategic thinking language, level 3, and not level 4. That's I guess my.
The compare contrast.
Right.
So, and I don't care, I just went back and put that back in there so we could go back to, we have one that
On
says determination.
standardized tests, what they're asked to do is the second bullet would be to explain relationships among the texts, because they're doing two texts side by side, and they're on the same topic, but they have different ideas and information and logic, and, in the case of literary text, different approaches with different characters.
Should we meet in the middle? Can we keep the first one compare and contrast? Can we keep the second one explain relationships? Because I do wonder, in the first one, it really is more about
Makes sense.
comparing and contrasting.
It is.
Right.
And the second one really is more about relationships.
Explaining the relationships that they have in these various, elements, the various text elements.
What's wrong with saying analyze and explain? Because one's level 4, one's level 3, so you're including the highest level.
Well, then in that case, would we
Synthesize
say explain and
relationships.
analyze like text?
Right,
It says.
that's what
And so
I
do
meant,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
Since you do it first.
right.
I just don't wanna
So-
get hung up on the verb
I agree.
just
I
because
agree.
we feel
I
like
just want
it
them
has to
be
be.
Right,
there.
because I agree with you, compare and contrast is going to come.
And I think
That's
since,
good anyway.
since the cluster says synthesize, I think you have to assume that you're going to be synthesizing
Right.
I don't
when
want it
you're
to
doing these
muddle the
skills.
meaning of what
No.
we're
But
trying
I
to
kind
say.
of agree though, I do like this compare, contrast, text in different forms, because when we think about what we ask students to do,
That's what we asked them to
it's,
do.
it's just what we do when we read the book, we watch the movie, right? We go, wow, that wasn't the same, that's not how I envisioned that at all, but this stayed true to the text, and here's how I know it stayed true to the text, so
And then it's about
that's
what
the comparing and
choices are
contrasting.
made, so
But
they
Yeah.
do
the
analyze.
theme and topic is really looking at that relationship
Mhm.
that exists or does not exist.
And the complexity of the comparing and contrast will
Right.
vary as you get the
Right.
things you're asking them
Right,
to do
right.
as a 12th grader versus a 6th grader,
That's
yeah,
why
they're still
compares level 2
comparing and
and level
contrasting,
3.
but it's different, yeah.
Right.
So I think we're
And we
good,
address
right?
it later.
We good?
We like determine instead of explain. I don't care, really, but
Good point, I think so.
I don't care.
Alright.
on the last one, it's like,
Explain?
I
Well, I
don't
don't like determine so much, so.
explain relationships.
Explain,
I don't-
going back to
Or-
explain, or
You still
explain
want
and
to
analyze.
explain and analyze, okay.
On the last one, do we need to say something about that you're using other texts to do that, or is that implied? Because the other,
It's written on the top, the overarching thing,
that's true,
Right.
so besides that, use multiple texts, okay.
and I think there's digital and print up there also, right, on the top.
It was a hard one. I have meal tickets. When you come back, we're gonna do nonfiction, so that way we're,
It should be
I have my-
easier though, because a lot of them are the same.
okay, so let me give you your ticket. Yesterday I put it in order and then it's lagged, and now
I
I
do need genre.
You put them in sports teams.
it's like it's walking around.
Well, I'm on the other news, I have to move my car.
Oh,
So
you're on
I'm
the,
thinking,
you're on the street.
I had knee surgery 5 weeks ago.
Oh,
and I'm
okay, you
ready
have a
for
good
this.
reason.
Yeah.
Then you have to walk out there to do that.
Okay, so, oh, this was silly, should not have gone that way. What time are we coming back?
12, come back.
Question.
Yeah, it's not bad.
You're right, it's topic related to informational standards, it's teams makes more sense than
12:15.
the literary ones.
12:15 is.
Why don't we
shoot for 12:15?
Depending
I
on how
guess,
busy
well, I
it is down
guess, potentially, so if I'm teaching animal farm, I could potentially have you read about like the
Okay,
Russian
so
Revolution
during
as a
questions,
topic.
I could do the Tammy, right?
You know what I mean, like that wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, really
teaching
Tammy,
animal
Tammy,
farm
right?
as it is-
I think they were crossing out her name, putting reading on there, but
See, and
they
there
didn't.
could even be, Jeanette, literary,
That's all right, not Lisa. I'll do that.
nonfiction on a topic, like war
But
and
she's,
peace.
and even when
I'm
she's
sure.
Literary
Oh.
nonfiction.
Because we didn't have one for her to
Somebody's
begin with, there just wasn't one, so actually gets
I
it
don't
printed.
know.
You don't, sorry.
That's all right. I'm over it.
Okay, so what did we say? I'm sorry, 12:15?
12:15.
We're shooting for,
that's the
okay.
goal, yeah.
Too many cords, too many bags. Align with that.
Isn't that the truth? I always joke that I have one bag just for all my technology stuff.
know.
Tearing my MCL, I watch cords everywhere.
Here are those two, when you make your report, you might want to mention that you're looking at the reserve and also the programs, practices, career technical education.
Fabulous, thank you.
Yeah, we
I kind
want
of thought that of my relationship.
to set your
You bring lunch?
Huh?
You're gonna eat.
Yeah, I got a little more of that than I did yesterday, but
Go eat. No, seriously.
no, really, I just like.
Did you get it turned
Do
on?
you want me to bring you any?
It's already turned off.
No, well, I might.
It was on the top shelf.
Are you sure?
Are
What's
you
the
wanting
link
to
say?
Oh,
It says
speak
stop
phone.
recording.
No.
So click on it, and
Yeah.
that stops recording.
What are your
No,
thoughts?
you have to
No, I
click
think
with the,
it's-
no,
Oh.
it's not a
It's good,
touch
I'm a
screen.
little.
Oh.
With the cursor,